Not too long ago, a friend set me up with a blind date. A handsome guy, but he probably spent more time on his hair than I did. He seemed pleasant enough, so I introduced myself and sat down next to him. He laughed and shook his head. "I pictured you differently," he admitted. "I mean, you're beautiful, but I thought you'd be—" "Strawberry blonde," I interrupted. "A bit shorter, freckled with deep dimpled cheeks." He stopped laughing, but kept a frozen smile. He didn't know what to say. I just stared at him. I knew this was gonna happen. So why did I ever think this time would be different? "Was that it?" I pushed. "Was that what you pictured?" I didn't even notice that I'd raised my voice. The date was already over as I started screaming at him. "Was that what you goddamn pictured?" I had already screwed up. At that point, all I could do was lean into it. "Let me explain. This has been the story of my life. People remember me wrong. They picture me wrong. Even my own parents could swear that I used to be strawberry blonde as a kid. There isn't a single picture of me with that hair color. I don't have freckles or deep dimples that make my cheeks puff up. I'm tall with ink black hair. I got my Mediterranean features from my mom, and that doesn't allow for a lot of cutesy freckles. Still, every person I've met remembers me that way. Sometimes, when we haven't met for a while, they barely recognize me. One of the most common questions I get is whether or not I've done something with my hair. It's really frustrating whenever I have to show my ID, as people just seem hesitant to accept the way I look to be the real me. And yes, I've tried leaning into it, changing my hair color, even putting on freckles with a makeup pin. It doesn't help. It still just looks kind of off. The weird thing is, sometimes I even trick myself. Some mornings, I don't recognize my own mirror image. For a split second, like a bump in the night, I'm staring at a stranger. I've talked to my therapist about possibly having some sort of depersonalization disorder, but that just isn't it. The problem isn't just me not recognizing myself. It is no one else recognizing me either. This is why I've come to an uncomfortable conclusion. Maybe I was supposed to be someone else. This has been my reality for as long as I can remember. Every date, every party, every picture day at school, every single time someone asks me what I've done with my hair, or that they like my new makeup, all these little hints and pokes. It adds up over time. Maybe you can see why I'm a bit sensitive, and might lash out at, let's say, a blind date. But something strange happened that one night. As I stormed off, I took a long walk by the downtown park area. There were a lot of people out and about, but I was all up in my head about overreacting. I thought about ways I could have handled it differently, or maybe that I just had to, I don't know, start taking some kind of medication. Any kind. Whatever kind stops this. That's when I first noticed Daniel. It was this strange feeling. He was standing outside of a taco truck, talking to a group of friends. He didn't seem to stand out in any particular way, but I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He had this strawberry blonde hair, pale skin, and freckles, deep dimples that made his cheeks look bigger. He was shorter than his friends, but he just radiated this joy. I can't explain it. It feels like I could probably draw it as a picture, but I can't explain it with words. I had to talk to him. I walked up to him, past his friends, and tapped him on his shoulder. As he turned around, my mind cramped. He wasn't strawberry blonde, freckled, dimpled, or pale. He was Korean, sort of lumpy looking, and in complete shock. So were his friends. Still, he looked at me like he recognized me. There was something there, and neither of us could say what it was. We both laughed. "How did you?" We said it at the same time, mirroring each other's expressions. We both laughed again. "Did you see?" Again, at the same time. His friends were laughing now as well. "Jinx!" they yelled at us. "Jinx! Jinx!" I had a long conversation with Daniel that night, and we got to know each other. Turns out we were both born on the same day, but that was where our similarities ended. We'd gone to completely different schools in different parts of the country, and we both had the same problem. People mistook us for someone else, remembered us wrong. It was even more abrupt for him, not even matching the body shape of the image people thought he was. His friends eventually grew tired of us and left. Daniel and I sat there in the park, talking long into the night. We complained about the way people talked about us, how we never really felt like someone saw us, how this weird stupid quirk was the one defining thing about what it meant to be us. When we finally parted ways, we friended each other and promised to speak again. We did, a lot. Over the next few weeks, we talked every day. I couldn't help myself, still mentally picturing him as someone else, like a brain teaser. I thought about him as this thin, pale man, with the same features that people thought I had. It bothered me, but this was exciting. I had never met anyone with the same problem as myself, and all of a sudden, it felt like maybe there wasn't that much wrong with me after all. Then the dreams came. I've always had lively dreams. I'm a very tactile person, so I remember the touch of something before I think of what it looks like. In the night, I could sometimes feel things that I swore I'd never felt before. Holding someone's hand with a hand that isn't mine, feeling a breeze through someone else's hair, tasting someone else's breath in your mouth, and the smell of birch trees reaching in through their nose, like I was a passenger in another body. It would only last short moments, and would interrupt whatever other dream I had, to the point that I'd wake up, often in a cold sweat, like my body was scared, even though my mind was calm. Daniel told me he experienced something similar. It was getting more intense. Ever since we met, whatever this problem was had been turned up to 11. We decided to meet and talk about it. For real. We met at the park, not too far from the taco truck where I first saw him. He brought me a milkshake. At first, I didn't even see him. I was expecting the strawberry blonde man that occupied my mind, not whoever this stranger in front of me was. I shook the thought out of my head, thinking he probably felt the same. "We should just go for it," he said. "Lean into it. See what happens." "What do you mean?" "Like we do in the dreams." I just looked at him. At first, I couldn't connect those thoughts to the person I saw in front of me. The more I thought about it, it felt like I could see through him, like what he showed wasn't real, that there was a realer part of him that I recognized, the part we all thought we truly saw before the spell was broken. We raised our hand at the same time and held them against one another. For a split second, I was somewhere else. A meadow in a birch forest, late springtime. Morning dew was still setting on the blue sunflowers surrounding us. Standing next to someone I felt close to, someone I felt safe with. A warm hand against mine, like we'd had 1,000 times before. And still, that uneasy feeling. I was still on the park bench. I dropped my milkshake. "Did you see that?" Daniel asked. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I did. I think I know where that is," he said. "I've been there." We got to his car and drove away, following a smaller dirt road out of the city, the one down by the Frog Lake. Instead of turning back onto the main road, he followed a smaller road to the log cabins. We were going off-road, and still, I didn't mind. I felt safe. He knew this place better than me, and I had no idea why, or how I would even know that. It was dark outside, but I knew he could get us there either way. We'd been here before. Not this Daniel, and not this me, but the real us. The road came to an abrupt end, and we got out. Daniel held my hand. There was an overgrown path in the forest, leading us deeper into the woods. Pine trees gave way to birch. The space between the trees tickled winds into pushing against us. For a moment, I was back. That springtime morning, hand in hand. Blue sunflowers, a symbol of things to come. We were siblings, and we were pure. Something touched my nose, and I snapped back to reality. A feather. Where did it even come from? I don't even want to know anymore, sighed Daniel. I really don't. I think we have to, I said. I know. He nodded. But still. Yeah, still. Someone wanted us to go there. We had been told it would be fine, that everything would work out. Someone had told us a lie, but I didn't know who or why. There, in the dark birch woods, I saw the outlines of sunflowers next to the overgrown path. What we were remembering was old, but no less real. My body was itching, telling me to stop. The milkshake wasn't settling in my stomach. All this had ever been was a mild inconvenience. And now, it was literally controlling my life. But at least I wasn't alone, and I could feel something coming. Truth, perhaps. Harsh truth. We knew the meadow was just around the bend, but were no less awed when it came. The sky seemed more open. The sun we were remembering was replaced by a moon, and the white clouds had turned black. This was the place. This is where we'd been. For a moment, I didn't see Daniel. I saw my brother, smiling at me, talking to me, words reaching out to me, like spoken underwater. I believe. I didn't even notice him saying it out loud. The real him. The Daniel I'd gotten to know over the past few weeks. What? I said. What did you say? I don't remember, he admitted. I don't know why I said that. Wait, what else do you want to say? We closed our eyes and spoke from a memory that wasn't our own. Song's eternal, I said. As before, as is now, as will be. Don't say that. I opened my eyes. Daniel was holding back tears, his face shaking. Something bad happens. I feel it. We're doing something bad. I could feel it too, like something crawling up my throat. I watched another white feather dance in the wind, blowing through the meadow. Daniel nodded at me and took a deep breath. We have to keep going, he said, closing his eyes. I know. You're my kin. My soul is true. A sun gone black, a moon gone blue. Ask you, Savior, through and through. If not the three of us, then who? As before, I said. As is now, Daniel continued. Then, quiet. There was supposed to be a third person. There had been a third person that day. She knew what would happen to us. We were the next generation to meet. Him. And no amount of promised eternity could convince her to surrender. Instead, there was a knife. She felled my brother first, then me. A knife bound for our hearts. The song remained unsung, tainting the land and every living thing within. A promise unkept, potential unraveled. A parted cloud revealing the eye of a vengeful beast. Every bird in the meadow bursting open at the seams, their feathers falling like snow. I was there that day, watching my brother bleed out in the dried grass. The sun eclipsed in black, our spilled blood burrowing into the ground, tainting it for generations. A dark pool puddling deep in the soil, cursing our cowardice. We could have been beautiful, all three of us. The sky had gone dark as the clouds hid the moon. Daniel screamed, only to suddenly stop. A part of me knew what was to come. There was a third person in that meadow, and they just killed Daniel. I couldn't see anything, but I had to run. I tripped on a rotting log and stepped into an anthill. The grass was so dry that I could hear the footsteps of someone approaching. Daniel was wheezing for air, and then stopped. I'd heard it once before. "As will be," growled a third voice. "As will fucking be." Had it been another second, they would have gotten me. A memory of their fingertips grabbing my strawberry blonde hair flashed before my mind. The imagined pain of a knife between my shoulder blades shot through me. The blameless coward was making up for past mistakes, but it had cost me my life. A part of me was screaming with joy, a deep, evil part of me, the part that lay dying with the real Daniel. The other part of me was stepping out of an anthill and took off straight into the woods. It was a woman. She wasn't alone. Footsteps in the dark, joyous screams. People running, stumbling, falling and crying in the dark. A dozen of them at least. Some came close enough for me to hear their breaths, but it was pitch black. I figured they'd hear me if I kept running, so instead, I laid down. I hid next to a large rock. As the minutes passed, I heard them sweep the area, mistaking each other for me. Someone screamed in pain. Another screamed in joy. Someone was silenced by a crunching sound, as teeth sunk into flesh. Madmen in the dark, whooping and shouting, begging for my death, for their release, asking me to give up and die. I covered my ears and prayed for dawn. My pulse raced so fast, I could barely hear the individual beats anymore. I held my breath until I almost passed out. It felt like an eternity, but my panicked lizard mind refused to let me out of the moment. I couldn't even count the seconds. I just waited, moment by moment, for the nightmare to end. In an instant, or an eternity, came dawn. It worked. I don't know how, but it did. I had twisted my ankle without even noticing, but come the dawn, I could barely walk. There was still morning dew in the air, and a couple of blue sunflowers looked my way. I found no traces of Daniel's body, and when I called the police, there wasn't much they could do. They did ask me many questions about this supposed third person, and there was plenty of physical evidence for a group of people in the area, but nothing definite. People rarely fish down at Frog Lake anymore, and most people who live in that area are just weird loners. This far into the woods, no one can hear you scream. We could be combing the forest for days without finding a speck of blood. The investigation is kept under wraps. No one has talked to me about it, and no one seems to be asking about Daniel anymore. And me, well, people don't mistake me for that strawberry blonde girl anymore. I think she died in that field, next to her brother. Maybe now, my life can truly be my own. I think I'll be okay. I've been thinking a lot about what I went through that night, a couple of years back. I've never had the chance to process it. I think when you go through something traumatic or unusual, you compartmentalize it to the point where it feels like it happened to somebody else. That's what it feels like to me. Back then, I was living in a suburb near Pittsburgh. I was making ends meet, but the margins were slim, and the notion of owning my own house felt like a dream at best. I'd been dating a girl for 2 years, looking for the perfect time to propose, but I just couldn't find the right time and place. But my fortunes were about to change. I got offered a promotion at my job. I'd be a shift manager at a large chemical plant in a couple of weeks. But even better, I got an email about something that, I think, Might be the perfect time and place for me to finally propose. I was subscribed to a newsletter for a particular singer-songwriter that my girlfriend and I both enjoyed. The first thing we'd ever bonded over was music. There was a promotional campaign where there would be a sneak release of tickets to an upcoming tour, and the first 30 in line would be offered backstage passes. I couldn't imagine a better place to pop the question. Maybe I could get a chance to do it on stage if I asked nicely. I made up an excuse about going to see my brother and packed a campout kit to get in line well and early. The newsletter recommended all of those interested to be in line at least 24 hours ahead of the ticket release. Please be patient and understanding, the email read, and please wait in line. I drove out there early Saturday morning. They'd arranged it as a sort of pop-up store. It was gonna have all kinds of merch. And by opening day, there'd be plenty of people dropping by to get ordinary tickets. But I'd be one of those 30 who got the good ones, come hell or high water. It was awkward getting there though. They'd shut down 3 of the roads for maintenance, making me zigzag between cones and waiting for traffic in opposing lanes to take a turn. There was an apartment complex nearby, but that had been tented up for fumigation. A couple of nearby stores were shut down after health inspections. All in all, it was just bad timing, and there would be no comforts. But I got a bunch of gear packed. I'd be fine. I had an audiobook, some TV shows, and a lawn chair with a slot for an attachable umbrella. I could sit out there for days if need be. As with most pop-up events, there was no big sign, and the location was closed with metal shutters out front. The only thing that showed that this was the place was a discreet little poster on the side of the door that read, "You made it." The newsletter had mentioned that particular poster. It was all designed in a way to make the release feel exclusive. I got there about 23 hours early, and my heart sank. There were already people in line. Luckily, I only counted 27, but for a short moment, I was ready to throw in the towel. I got to the back of the line, did a second and third count, and breathed a sigh of relief. As long as no one cut in line, I was in the green. So I set up my chair, attached an umbrella to my chair, and got started on the first season of Monk. After a couple of hours, the line had grown to about 50 people before slowing down. Maybe those in the back were hoping people up front would either drop out, or maybe they hoped there would be extra tickets. The email had mentioned that there might be a couple of extra tickets, but it couldn't be guaranteed. But I was still in the green, so I didn't have to worry all that much. It wasn't an unpleasant place to stay. The building was facing away from the sun, and there wasn't any traffic nearby because of all the maintenance. I think the crews had stopped working for the weekend. Because there was little to no machine noise, I didn't hear a single jackhammer or concrete mixer, just the ambiance of the city and the murmur of the people in line. There was a bit of a tussle up front. This one woman was getting up and talking to people. She was hard to miss. She had this neon green band shirt and blue-colored hair. You could see her from a mile away. She went down the line asking if anyone had any antihistamines, allergy pills. She was having some sort of reaction. Turns out, no one had any, so she had to head off to find some. There was a drugstore a couple of blocks away, and the guy next to her promised she could keep her spot. So she walked away, thanking those around her for being so understanding. Thing is, she never came back. Hours later, her spot was still vacant. By dinner time, I kicked up a conversation with the guy next to me. He'd arrived just after I did, so he was still among the first 30. His name was Rodney, and he had this lean metalhead kind of build. Arms covered in tattoos, and those kinds of pants with zippers that you can turn into shorts. It didn't look like his kind of venue. "I'm surprising my girl," Rodney smiled. "She loves this stuff." "Same here," I said. "I think I might pop the question." "Congrats, love to see it." He offered me a Coke, and I took it. He hadn't prepared himself quite like I had, so I offered him my iPad to watch some shows while I listened to my audiobook. We shared a couple of stories, some snacks, and added one another to our socials. I chomped down on a cold burrito for dinner and took a nap. Rodney was on his phone talking to a friend for a bit. The people ahead of me were having a conversation of their own, and I only caught parts of it. They were discussing if there were 30 tickets in total, or if there were more tickets given out to the first 30 people. Was there only one ticket per person? Because if all in line wanted 2 or more, that would be over 60 in total. The email hadn't specified it, so they were a bit worried. I had no idea, but there was no point in arguing about it. We'd see in about a day. There was this one guy who was a couple of spots ahead of me that had to step out of the line. He had a friend coming by to drop some stuff off to him, so he asked if they could hold his spot for a bit. It would just be a couple of minutes. I saw him disappear around the corner. Doing that, I'm in a bit of a hurry kind of jog that polite people do. A couple of minutes passed, then half an hour. After a full hour, he still wasn't back. Isn't that strange? I said to Rodney. 2 people have gone to get something, and none came back. Sure, yeah. Strange. He nodded. But some people just say those things to get an excuse to leave. It's embarrassing to say you're bored, you know? I guess. It's just strange. I work at the hospital, he said. I'm an anesthesiologist. I know what people who crack under pressure looks like. They always shuffle away with a convenient excuse. You sure that's it? I asked. Nah, but I got no other explanation. Fair enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sounds of the city lowered to a mumble. Cars gave way to people walking their dogs, and in this particular neighborhood, there was a lot of those. There were a couple more people who got out of line and walked away, not to return. We were still well over 40 though, but I think some got cold feet as the city got dark. A couple of light posts from a nearby street, they cast long shadows across the pavement. I was having a nap when Rodney poked me. He looked confused. Some folks in the back say we're in the wrong line. They're opening some name brand store. There ain't no ticket sales. Are you shitting me? I scoffed. You can't be serious. A guy 3 steps ahead looked back. This ain't no store opening, he called back. It's an autograph signing. That kicked up a murmur. All of a sudden, the entire line was talking. There was some confusion about what we were actually doing out there. A lot of people were there for tickets, but for different artists. Some were there for a shop opening, an autograph signing, or a giveaway. A couple of phones were passed around and shown, so we could compare emails. All emails were from different accounts, seemingly official enough to get past the spam filters. They all advertised different things, but they ended with the same line. Please be patient and understanding, and please wait in line. It became rapidly apparent that no one had the faintest idea what this opening actually was. A couple of folks just got up and left. Finally, the guy at the very front stepped out of the line. I'm not sticking around for some fucking scam, he spat. I'm going home, and you should too. A couple more people packed up but hadn't decided what to do. I was a bit on the fence about it, but as I watched the first man round the corner, I figured there'd been some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe they were doing several promotions at once. I heard his voice. He sounded surprised and a little angry. What is this? Then he screamed. A blood-curdling, ear-bleeding scream. It got quiet. Everyone looked at one another, trying to find an answer to what was going on. I got out of my chair to get a better look, but Rodney put his hand on my arm. Hold on, he said, lowering his voice. Don't go. We should call someone. He agreed, but we could see other people already calling for help. The man from the front of the line never returned. There was someone in the back who called for help. A few people walked down the road to see if everyone was okay, but they never returned either. A patrol vehicle came by about 20 minutes later. 2 police officers walked up asking questions. Everyone said the same thing. A man had stepped away, and it sounded like he got hurt. The officers did a sweep of the road, and when they came back around, they shrugged it off. "There's nothing here," they said. "You sure he didn't just call out to a friend?" There were a lot of raised voices at that. But what could we say? It wasn't illegal to step out of line and not come back. There was no blood or any sign of a struggle. Maybe we hadn't heard what we thought we heard. But people were raising other issues, like the emails we'd been sent. It all seemed like a plot to trick us, that the officers had something to say about. "Nah, it's legit," one said. "We were informed that there would be people waiting in line for some kind of event." They had no idea what the promotion was for though, and even if they did, they couldn't disclose it. It was all arranged by an event promoter, who'd in turn been hired by someone else. All in all, there was nothing they could do but wish us the best of luck and be on their way. As they left, I noticed them meeting up with someone walking their dogs at the end of the street. They shook hands, looked at us, and went their separate ways. Rodney and I stayed up late. We decided we'd take turns sleeping just to make sure no one took our things. I took the first shift. The line had whittled down to about 30 people by then. There'd been a lot of people trickling out after the uncertainty of what this was supposed to be. Of course, none of them came back. I didn't hear anything else, but there was this rising unease that there was something inherently dangerous about stepping away. I could hear a couple of people talking about it. That is, until a woman further back had enough. She'd been sitting quietly for a while, listening to people talk over her. "It's not a big deal," she groaned. "Look, I'll walk one lap around the building. I'll leave my purse here so you know I'll be back, alright?" Maybe she was tired or frustrated. Maybe she wanted to prove a point. She stepped out of line and rounded the corner with a huff. Judging by the size of the building, it ought to take her a couple of minutes at a brisk walking speed. But as those minutes dragged on into a half an hour, it was clear she wasn't coming back. She'd left everything behind, so it was clear this wasn't voluntary. Something had kept her from coming back. No one would willingly leave behind their identification, credit cards, or phone. A couple of people discussed leaving as a group. Someone mentioned leaving while being on a phone call to report back as they went, but no one wanted to take the risk. We didn't know what was going on, and no one was eager to put themselves on the line. Instead, we waited, speculated, and murmured back and forth about what might be going on. Was it a trafficking thing? Gang-related? Or was this whole thing just a big misunderstanding? I woke up Rodney around midnight and leaned back in my chair. I told him about the woman leaving her things behind, and I could see something settle on his brow. It was a strange position to be in. We were either completely fine or in incredible danger. But which was it? Which made more sense? I had a nervous sleep. No dreams, just a stream of thoughts. I kept waking up for the dumbest reasons. A car playing loud music a couple of streets down, a barking dog, someone throwing away a bunch of glass bottles, just everyday city noise. Rodney had slumped against the wall, chewing on some licorice. When he noticed me watching, he pointed down the street. "They keep coming back around." "Who?" I asked. "Not sure. Some guy walking his dog every 30 minutes or so." "The same guy?" "I don't know. Maybe." We kept our eyes on the street, and just like he said, a man with a dog passed by. He was wearing a large coat and a baseball cap, and the dog was one of the larger breeds, possibly a Saint Bernard, or some kind of sheepdog. "Every 30 minutes, Rodney reiterated. "I don't think he's walking his dog." "So what's he doing then?" Rodney shook his head and took another bite of licorice. "Patrolling." It was the middle of the night when the police came back. 2 officers, same as before, walked down the line with an audible sigh. "Someone called again," they said. "What's going on?" A young man got up and pointed at the woman who'd left her things behind. The police scooped it up, checked it, and promised to take it back to the station. As they were about to leave, the young man asked if they could escort him to his car. They agreed. As he left, he looked back at the rest of us, holding up his phone. A woman he'd been sitting next to held up her phone in response. "I'll stay on the line till I get home," he called out. "I'll keep you updated." It seemed to go well enough, but as they rounded the corner at the end of the street, I noticed one of the officers looking to the left and raised his hand, as if waving at someone just off to the side. We all looked at the woman with the phone. She was hunched over, cradling it with both hands, listening through wireless earpieces. She'd say something occasionally like a quiet, "Yes, I'm still here," or "Are you okay?" Then, after a couple of minutes, her eyes went wide. "Hello?" she said. "Dan, are you there?" There was no response. I could see the tears pull in her eyes as her hand started to shake. He'd promised to stay on the line. Something must have gone wrong. "They're picking us off," muttered Rodney. "Someone is picking us off." "But why?" I whispered back. "What's the point?" "Think about it," he said. "This whole block is basically shut down. Road work, maintenance, fumigation, renovations. It's just us out here. But why us? Why now? There's gotta be a reason." Everyone was awake by then. We tried to figure out if we all had something in common. We all looked different, and we were all different ages. We were there for different reasons, and we all lived in different parts of town. There was nothing readily apparent that we had in common. "Dan works at a bottling plant," the woman with the phone added. "I'm in retail." Others joined in. One was an airplane pilot, another was a bodyguard, a firefighter, a translator, all very different people in very different lines of work. However, we had one thing in common. We all had access to something. Rodney had access to pretty much whatever at the hospital. The woman working retail had access to influential private clients. The firefighter had control over who had what shift, and who could respond to what call. The translator could listen in on private information. I was no different. I was about to become shift manager at the plant. I could choose what and who and where and when. "Is that it?" Rodney said. "Is that what we're here for? But what's the point of taking us out?" I asked. "This isn't hurting anyone but us." The man walking his dog was back for another round, but it looked like he'd slowed down for a bit as Rodney talked. I saw him stop at the end of the street, giving us a long look, and his dog looked too. Somewhere around 3 a.m., a whole group of people got up from the back of the line. The idea was clear. They were going to rush out of there. Others protested, saying they could call people over to come help. "If we all call someone, we can make a crowd," a man called out. "We can leave as a crowd and we'll be fine." "No, we have to spread out," someone else said. "We go different ways and we go fast. Some of us are bound to get out." Rodney got up too, but his voice drowned in the crowd. Things were getting heated, and people were pushing one another. Angry fingers were being pointed. Phrases were repeated over and over and over. The argument was quickly turning into a shouting contest. "There's at least 8 people patrolling," Rodney tried to say. "I've counted. There's at least 8. At least 8. But no one listened. And as push came to shove, a group of people from the back of the line spread out and ran into the night. Rodney slouched back down against the wall, breathing heavily. We all held our breaths, listening. We could hear footsteps running around in different alleyways. It started with a crash, like someone taking a tumble into a trash container. Then, one pair of footsteps stopped. Not long after, another stopped. And from a far-off corner, I heard this barking. A loud growling bark. "No," someone pleaded. "No, no, 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 no." There was no screaming, no gunshots. All the sounds just stopped, and no one came back. A guy from the back of the line called out to them, but got no answer. We were down to about 20 people. Some were calling home, others were calling the police. But they weren't about to come back here for a third time. One called a taxi, but they couldn't find a place to park. So they had to stop at an adjacent street, which we couldn't get to. There was also this one woman with a face tattoo that asked to borrow a phone. Rodney handed over his. "I'm getting my guys down here," she said. "You'll see. I'm done." She made a call, shouting angrily for a couple of minutes. After the person on the other end finally seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, Rodney got his phone back. About 20 or so minutes later, 6 very tired men came wandering down the street. I could see the outline of holsters inside their cheap jackets. "We're going," the tattooed woman called out. "Y'all can come if you want." A couple of people got up. I looked at Rodney, but he shook his head. "Suit yourself," she continued. "We're leaving." We watched them walk away and around the corner. I heard them starting a car and putting it into gear. There was music playing, something loud with a thumping bass. It sounded like they were about to drive away when I heard a bark. It was more like a growling cough. Then, a gunshot, then another. The sound bounced against the walls, ringing out over the city. I saw a couple of lights turn on in distant buildings. Then, all was quiet again. No one wanted to go look. Some people screamed at nearby houses, hoping for someone to open a window and look our way. No one did. The line itself was in complete disarray by then. People were packing and unpacking, pacing back and forth, hoping some opportunity would show itself. I wasn't immune to it, but I tried to stay calm. Rodney helped me a lot. He was a lot more calculated than I'd imagined when I first saw him. He counted the people walking by. He measured the dogs. He listened for repeating sounds. My mind was tired, but my heart kept my eyes open and frantic. "I don't get this one thing," I said. "There's a timeline." "What do you mean?" he asked. "They gave us a time this would open," I continued. "If they're just gonna keep us here until they've picked us off, why would they give us an endpoint? There's gotta be something to it," he said. "Some reason for this specific place and this time. And what happens when it opens?" We looked at one another. Whatever was going on, there couldn't be anything good in there. Rodney brought up the idea of breaking into the place we'd been lining up for. A couple of folks were on board, but the front gates were barred shut, and the personnel entrance was on the back of the building. That kicked up all the previous arguments about calling for help, or moving as a group, or running like panicked animals into the night. We tried to bend a piece of rebar into a makeshift crowbar, but we couldn't get it to work. The place was locked down hard, and we hadn't brought anything to break through. We couldn't do it. A couple of people thought about collecting jackets and making a line so we could pull them back if need be. The problem was, no one wanted to volunteer. "Nothing happens until we're out of sight," someone said. "As long as we're within view, nothing happens. So someone can go to the end of the street, look around the corner and come back." We had a volunteer for that, a large guy in his early 40s. He brushed off our worries, grabbed his backpack, and went to the end of the street. We could see him the whole time as he called back to us. "Hey, there's a car here," he yelled. "The door's open. There's no one here." "Can you see anything?" Rodney called out. "Nothing," he said. "Not a soul." He turned to go back to us when he stopped. He looked to the side. There was a hint of doubt there. Rodney peered up at me, then back at the man. "I think the patrol's coming around," he said. "Any moment now." Suddenly, the man started running back to us. By the time he reached us, 3 of us were up on their feet to catch him and slow him down. He was panting like he was having an episode. We looked back towards the street, where a person walking his dog had stopped to look at us. "That's no dog," the man wheezed. "I don't know what that is, but it's no dog." For a couple of seconds, we all just stared at the stranger. There really was something unusual about that dog. Its back legs had a curious shape, and there was a shine to the eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Almost blue. A couple more people would crack in the following hour. One just straight rushed down the road. Another tried to leave but was held back by the others. A couple tried to call people for help, or to have someone escort them to their car, but nothing came of it. One guy kept calling the police over and over, yelling at the operator that if they were that upset with him, they were free to come down and arrest him at any time. By dawn, there were less than 20 of us still waiting in line. It was about 6 a.m. when I saw someone coming down the road, a woman with blue-colored hair and a neon green band shirt. I poked Rodney. We recognized her. She'd been the first one to leave, and the one who went to get the allergy medication. She came back, I said. You sure? Rodney asked. You sure that's her? I'm positive, I said. Same clothes and everything. She waved at us. She was smiling and a bit bouncy, like she'd had a good night's sleep. In comparison, the rest of us were nervous wrecks. I heard there was trouble, she said. I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. What happened? I asked. Nothing happened, she insisted. The pills made me sleepy, so I just went home. I just came to get my things, see what's going on. I wasn't buying it, and by the looks of Rodney, he wasn't either. Others didn't seem all that sure, but a couple seemed to relax their shoulders a bit. Despite my reservations, she got a lot of people up on their feet. Maybe they really wanted to believe that it was all just a big misunderstanding. And yeah, it was convincing. She'd come back after all, but maybe she was some kind of plant. Or maybe it was just someone who sort of looked like her. About half of all the people who remained joined her. They left together, giving the rest of us a tired wave goodbye. Some broke down in tears. There was this one woman whose face was burned into my mind. She was completely beside herself, shaking like a dry leaf in the wind. I'm scared, okay? She cried. I'm scared. I don't understand what's going on. I just want to go home. She was assured and hugged and led by the hand. And slowly but surely, they all wandered off down the street, and none would return. About an hour later, there were less than 10 of us. Rodney shook his head as he looked from side to side. No patrols, he said. They've missed it 2 times. You think we can go? I asked. No, he said. Something's up. He shook his head as we looked down the road, only to see someone approaching. It was one of the people who had been walking their dog. Except now, they weren't just passing by. They were stopping at the end of the street. A couple more joined in, blocking off the other exits. One by one, they bent down and let their dogs off their leash. I looked at Rodney. For the first time, he looked scared. I could see his chest rising and falling with little claustrophobic breaths. We were being closed in on from all sides. They've fanned us out, he whispered. They outnumber us. What the fuck do we do? I whispered back. He got up, and I followed. Others were taking notice as well. But as we began to spread out, we could see the approaching people moving to intercept. Then, the barking. I'll never forget the moment. The dogs stepped out of the shade of the surrounding buildings. They looked almost completely black in the shadows, but they remained equally black when they stepped into the morning light. They had this ink-black slick skin. Their back feet looked like something from a bird, and the entire body was hunched over on all fours. It was more humanoid than I thought, and as they got closer, they stretched out. The smaller of them, at full length, was at least 6'7". One of them looked my way with a shark-like grin, scratching the pavement like an eager dog with long pointed claws. I looked back at Rodney a final time, and in a split-second realization, all hell broke loose. Someone made a run for it, only to be tackled to the ground. One of the dogs got them by the neck and bit down hard with a sickening snap. One guy tried to climb a light post, hoping he could get up to a window of a nearby building. 2 more creatures tore down the light post, breaking it with a snap as he came tumbling to the ground. They were picking us off one by one, killing us, feeding on us. A couple had time to scream for help, but the creatures targeted whoever made noise first. The 40-something-year-old man who had gone out to the street earlier was tackled face first into the pavement and had those razor-sharp teeth dug into the back of his neck. My mouth tasted salt as morbid death smells crept up my nose. We didn't stand a chance. There were at least 12 of them, and they knew what they were doing. Rodney and I stayed by the wall, trying to make ourselves as small as possible. I got a good look at some of the dog walkers. A couple of them were complete strangers, but a couple of them I recognized from earlier. They'd been in line, just like me and Rodney. Maybe they'd been plants, or something else entirely. The creatures were feasting. One of the handlers went up to the locked building and rolled it open as one of them walked up to me and Rodney. He looked us up and down as one of the creatures settled down by his side, snarling and drooling, starved and ready to pounce. The man adjusted his glasses, peering out from under his baseball cap. "We got any hatchers left?" he called out. The building opened. I couldn't see what was inside from my angle, being pushed up against the wall. "All done," someone responded. "Got 'em all." The man looking at me and Rodney was maybe 30 years old, with a fashioned beard, simple square glasses. I couldn't have picked him out of a crowd. He looked down at the dark creature and adjusted his nondescript baseball cap. "Which one you want?" he asked. "Which did you dream of?" I felt something to my right. Rodney reached out and grabbed my hand, not because we were making a break for it, or to try some last-minute master plan. He was just scared. And when you're scared, you want to hold someone's hand. So he held mine. The creature looked at us. A hint of blue reflected at us from its deep eyes. We fumbled for the right words to say. Some plea, some brilliant last-minute monologue, something to appeal to their sense of kindness and humanity. But the stranger with the glasses didn't move a muscle. He might as well have been shopping for groceries. And with that, the creature growled. It had decided. It pounced on Rodney. I held his hand for as long as I could. I didn't look. I remember the sensation of screaming, but I don't remember the sound. My throat turned raw. The muscles in Rodney's hand tightened, then fell limp. The man with the glasses took a step forward, shushing the creature. There, he said. "It's okay. Dream well. Eat." Bone crunching, sinew snapping, meat, and the smell of hot iron. I closed my eyes so hard my skull ached. There was noise all around me. I didn't hear most of it, as I could barely make out anything over the sound of my own heart. There was biting and ripping, interlaced with the most casual-sounding conversation. "You got the shells?" someone asked. "No need, we're torching." "You sure?" "It's clear. We got a firefighter." I looked up. A couple creatures began to look different as they ate. Some had brighter skin, some were shorter, fatter. I heard clattering as their claws fell off their fingers, bones snapping as their legs straightened. Then the man with the glasses clapped his hands at me. "Hey," he said, "you can go." "What?" "You can go," he repeated. "We're done." I got up off the ground and cleared my eyes. A couple of people looked my way, and I could tell they weren't entirely convinced. Some were armed. I recognized one of them as the woman with the face tattoo. "You're letting me go?" "Sure," he said. "We got a full brood. We don't need you." "You can't kill people and walk away," I whispered. You can't do that." He shrugged at me like I'd asked him what the time was. I stepped back, and no one followed me. I glanced at the creature gnawing on Rodney, only to see that it had started to gain his features, his face, his gangly arms. And all the while, the man with the glasses calmly shushed and stroked its back. The others were setting fire to the building, using a can of gasoline and strip of newspaper. I only saw a brief glance of the inside. Black rock-like fragments littered the floor. Strange organic formations stuck to the wall in batches of 6 or 3. When he noticed I wasn't leaving, the man with the glasses casually waved a pistol at me. Not to shoot me, but to show that he had it. "Go on now," he said. And as the fire flared up, I stepped around the corner, and I didn't return. I came home in tears. I remember breaking down in the hallway, trying to explain everything all at once to my girlfriend. I told her about the tickets and the plans I'd made, and the people I'd met, and the dogs, and the handlers. All of it. I tried to show her Rodney's socials, and as I did, I noticed he was posting. My heart skipped a beat. "Long night," the post said. It was just a selfie, posted 10 minutes earlier. He looked fine, healthy even. But there was a little blue tint to his eyes that wasn't there before. No people went missing that night. Everyone came home eventually. And from what I've read, there haven't been any incidents. Everything just keeps going like normal, like nothing happened. So who can I call? What can I even say? You can't report a person not being properly killed to the police. I even texted Rodney once, and he responded like it was no big deal. "I just went home," he said. "I'm fine. We should hang out sometime." I haven't agreed to it. I don't think I can. I don't even know what to think anymore. About a week or so after this all went down, I got a card. An apology card with a sad blue sunflower on the front. Inside was a handwritten note. "Sorry for the inconvenience." It read, "There were 2 tickets to the concert, backstage passes. I ended up going. I proposed. I think I recognized a couple of people in the crowd, but I'm not sure. Now, years down the line, it all feels like a nightmare. I can't point to a single thing and say, 'Hey, look, it really happened.' There are no witnesses, and in the eyes of the law, no crime has been committed. But I know what I lived through that night. That'll stay with me forever. And I know this was violent and ugly and sick. But that email asked me to wait patiently, and maybe that's what saved my life in the end. Maybe I'm still waiting, but for what?" I've always had Wallace and Dan in my life. These two are not just my best friends. They're the closest thing to a family I've ever had. I can't remember a time when they weren't a part of my life. It's not a matter of obsessing over one another. They've just always been there for me. I care for them like they were my own foot or an arm. They just have to be there for things to work, you know? Things weren't going so well for me back in those days. Most of them I sat at home, isolating myself. I didn't eat much. I slept even worse. I was stuck in a dark place, and I couldn't really force myself out of it. Luckily, I didn't have to. I had people in my life who cared enough to take that step for me, and my buddies were adamant about bringing me back on my feet, straighten my back, so to speak. Wallace put together a bit of a celebration. First, drinks at his place. Chicken wings, cheese snacks, and poker. Then take an Uber downtown for more drinks and meeting some people. Dan had some friends from work we were gonna hang out with. Good people, like a work family, he said. Not my usual deal, but I could see that I needed to make an effort. So I dug around in my closet until I found something colorful and went to spend a night with the boys. We were originally going to go to Dan's place, but his sister was in town and needed to crash on his couch. She was welcome to come along, but she wasn't up for it. So at the last minute, We switched to Wallace's place, a row house on a rundown street, but in a good part of town. The kind of street that has a cigarette-infused corner shop just across the street from a Whole Foods. Wallace and Dan met me out on the curb. "I don't think he's taking his medicine, Wally," said Dan. "I'd have to agree, Dan," said Wally. They always did this thing where they kept repeating each other's names when they wanted to make a point. I could see where this was going a mile away. "Good thing we had a chat with Dr. Heineken," nodded Dan. "We know your dosage. And if he got it wrong, we got a 3-pack of second opinions from Nurse Guinness," added Wallace. "Nurses can't write prescriptions," I added. "They can in Canada," grinned Dan. "Look it up, it's true. This doesn't look like Ontario to me," I said, "but I get your point." "The man is down bad," huffed Wallace. "He's gonna need all the help he can get." We settled down around the dinner table, had some chicken wings, a couple of beers, and talked for a while. Wallace had a pretty bare-bones place, not much stuff on the walls. A living room, a bedroom, and a small guest room that doubled as an emergency storage. It was the kind of bachelor pad that had a slight echo to it if you listened closely. But it had all the essentials, a nice couch, a big TV, and a bed that hadn't had its sheets changed for a solid 2 months. Dan talked a lot about his sister coming to town, how she kept nagging him about pointless things, how he was the one helping her out, and she acted like she was the one taking care of him. "I'm not the one who cheated on my husband and got kicked out," Dan scoffed. "I'm not the one who quit my job on a whim to slack on my little brother's couch." "You're right," Wallace added. "You'd be very faithful to your husband. Bless your heart." "Damn straight," Dan nodded. "Too bad I'm not a woman." "Shame," I said. "I'd marry you." "Of course you would. You both would. I'm amazing." Wallace whipped out a deck of cards and put on something from Netflix in the background. Some reality show. Wallace usually liked to have a lot of sounds going on around him. He didn't like it when things got too quiet. He was from a big family, so it didn't take much for him to feel alone. I was on the opposite side of the spectrum, being an only child. Dan was somewhere in the middle. The two of them might sound like idiots, but they were more successful than people give them credit for. Wallace worked with overseas shipping, and Dan was the shift manager for a bottling plant. Not the kind of titles that needed years of study to reach, but the kind of positions that require a good head on your shoulders. They were solid people, great under pressure, and honest to a fault. We played a couple of rounds, chit-chatting between games. Wallace was a great bluffer. The only thing you could know for sure was that, whatever you thought he had something different. But when you figure that out, he changes to something else. He's the kind of player who always plays the person and not the cards, and he's damn good at it. Dan, on the other hand, is a wild card. He can go all in on the most random nonsense, but he can also quit when he's far ahead. He's a complete fluke, but sometimes that's what it takes to beat a guy like Wallace. We'd been playing for about an hour when I had to use the bathroom. I hurried away, locked the door, did my business, and reached for a towel to dry my hands. Problem was, Wallace's bathroom was downright nasty. Toothpaste flicked on the bathroom mirror, and a funky smell seeping into the guest hand towels. I could tell they'd been there for a while. Most things had this faint yellow tinge. I decided to get a fresh towel. I figured he had a couple hidden away for fancy company, so I dug through a pile of fresh laundry. Nothing peculiar there. I dug around some more. As I did, I heard the guys call out from the other room, telling me where to find more toilet paper if needed. There was a cabinet under the sink, a big one. It didn't have any handles, but I could tell you could open it. There was a magnet on the side, so I slid a finger in there and pulled it open. I think it had some kind of lock, because there was a bit of a forceful click. I think I broke it. Something small spilled out and moved across my arms. Maggots. Fat little white things, contracting and extending in sickly rhythm. They were all over the inside of the cabinet. At first, it looked like Wallace had crammed a big black trash bag in there, but looking a little closer, the details got clearer. It was a corpse. The body was wrapped in a black shirt and dark jeans. No shoes or socks. It had decayed into desaturated grayish green, almost mummified. Thin brown hair stretching down a wrinkled forehead, wide open mouth and hollowed out eyes, bone-yellow teeth like bars to an insect prison. That's where the smell came from. It wasn't just an unwashed bathroom. There was a dead body. A real, actual deceased human body. "You okay in there?" Wallace called out. "You need something?" "I'm good." My voice was cracking. My arms shook as my heartbeat engulfed every other sound. I tried brushing off the maggots that crawled up on me, but I kept finding more and more. I had to think fast. I brought out my phone and dropped it on the floor, squashing another maggot. I picked the phone back up and snapped a couple of pictures of the body. Then I grabbed a handful of toilet paper, cleaned up the maggots that had gotten out, and flushed them. I put everything back the way it was, but the door kept swinging open a little. I washed my hands again and stood by the mirror for a moment. I honestly thought I was having a nightmare. I couldn't fathom this being something real. A dead body in Wallace's bathroom. No wonder he didn't want us to be here for the pre-party. No wonder he was asking what was taking me so long. If he thought I knew, what would he do? I wiped my hands on the nasty hand towels and went back outside. The air felt warmer, but I think it was just me. Dan had brought out a cheese plate and some crackers. My eyes got stuck on the sharp cheese knife that was waiting on the far side of the table. As I sat down, Dan handed it to me, away from Wallace. "You gotta try this cheddar," he said. "You know I don't care for Wisconsin, but this thing might just change my mind." "Yeah, I'll try it," I muttered. "A little piece." "My honored dude, I'm giving you 3. You're gonna want 3. "All right." Wallace had this ambient smile, and he noticed me staring. His face didn't move a muscle. I'm sure he could see in me something had changed, but he didn't buckle. He just let my eyes stick to his. "It's good cheese," Wallace smiled. "I think you'll like it." "I gotta pace myself," I said. "Stomach's not what it used to be." "Yeah, you were in there a long time," he continued. "Real long time." We played a couple more rounds, passing the cheese plate around. Whenever Wallace picked it up, he did this little flick of a wrist that gave the blade a whooshing noise. Like he held it upside down and then flicked it up with a swoosh. It kept breaking my concentration, and I lost 3 hands in a row. It wasn't even close. I didn't have the slightest idea what to do. I had pictures on my phone. I could excuse myself and call the police, but could I leave Dan alone with him? Should I bring him along? But wouldn't Wallace figure out that I knew if I suddenly got up and left? There was also the possibility that I was wrong somehow, that Wallace hadn't done anything, that this was something else. The body looked really old. If it had been fresh, the whole building would have smelt like death. The body must have been dead for months. But that didn't matter. Wallace had lived here for years. Dan took a short break to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with Wallace. The reality show lingered in the background, covering the living room in Valley Girl banter. Wallace kept his eyes on me as I held the cheese plate near. More importantly, I kept the knife close. "I thought you didn't want to rush your stomach," he said. "You're hogging the cheese there." "I guess Dan was right," I nodded. "It's good." "Mind handing me that knife?" he said. "I want to cut a few slices." "How many you want?" I asked. "I want to do it myself," he said. "No offense, but you cut 'em too thick." "It's fine, I got you," I insisted. "How many you want?" A frown formed on Wallace's face. Subtle, but it was there. Not suspicion, but something else. Frustration. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe I was getting away with it. The discussion burst like a bubble as Dan came back with a vengeance. Salt, lemon, tequila shots. All the while, I could tell Wallace had noticed me keeping a close eye on the cheese knife. The reality show got stuck on the "Are you still watching?" verification check, underlying just how quiet things had gotten. Just the sounds of cards being shuffled and flipped, the occasional clink of a glass. Dan offered me another shot, but I turned it down. My head was already swimming. "You want something fancier?" he asked. "It's a special night. Now's a good time to ask." "No, really, I'm good," I said. A thought crossed my mind, and I held up a finger. I pointed at Wallace as casually as my body allowed. "By the way," I continued, "don't you have that other card game in your car? The one with the white cards and the nasty jokes?" "In my car?" Wallace asked. "You sure?" "Yeah, I think I brought it along last time we went out." "Funny," Wallace said. "That's funny." "No, really," I insisted. "I'm pretty sure you had it." Wallace didn't quite catch what I was going for. Dan, on the other hand, got up from his chair and pointed at the bedroom. "He means Cards Against Humanity, Wally. I think you got it in your bedroom." Dan wandered off before I could protest. I'd wanted to get Wallace separated so I could show Dan what was in the bathroom. Now I was stuck with Wallace again. He gave me a curious look. "You good?" he asked. "You don't seem all there, you know." I didn't know what to say, and by the time I'd figured out a good enough lie, too much time had passed. He could tell I wasn't being genuine. Despite all the drinks I'd had, my tongue was as dry as sand. I gave him a shrug and sipped my lukewarm Heineken. "I don't know," I said. It's been crazy." "You're telling me," he chuckled. "Man, I get it. It's like, when it rains it pours, you know? One day, and it's all upside down, inside out." "Yeah," I nodded. "Sometimes it all just happens." The image of the dead body flashed in my mind. The strangest detail stuck with me, like how long the teeth looked behind the retracted gums. Were all teeth that long? It made me hyper-aware of my mouth, making me smack my lips. "Changes take time," Wallace nodded. "We're here for you if you need it." And with that, he leaned across the table. I thought he was going to pat me on the hand, but instead, he snatched the cheese plate and the knife. He grinned as he cut up a piece of cheddar, giving me a weary smile. "No hogging the cheese," he grinned. "Not cool." Dan came back empty-handed. He found some other board games, but he figured we shouldn't start Monopoly this late. Besides, it didn't go well with tequila. We turned back to poker. Wallace put on another episode of that show. We discussed the details of where we were going and who we were going to meet. Wallace kept talking about this guy from work that couldn't be there, to the point where it made me take note. It was strange for Wallace to bring it up out of the blue. No one had asked. Was he inadvertently telling us who the corpse was? "I don't have a lot of friends at work," Wallace admitted. "I think y'all would like Chris. He's a nice guy. He can be the nicest guy in the world, but we're going for the dames," he said matter-of-factly. "That's just the way it is." "Why couldn't Chris come?" I asked. "He busy?" "Not sure," Wallace said with a shrug. "Preoccupied." During our next couple of rounds, I had another tactic. I would make sure our glasses were topped off. Both me and Dan had already used the bathroom, so I figured I could get Wallace to go next. That would give me some time alone with Dan. I made sure everyone drank, and like clockwork, Wallace excused himself for the bathroom. As soon as he locked the door, I fumbled my phone out of my pocket. Dan didn't notice anything at first, but as soon as he saw my demeanor shift, a worry settled over him. I unlocked my phone and put a finger to my lips. "Look," I whispered. "We gotta call for help. There's a dead body in there." "What?" It's like he didn't register the words. I might as well have spoken a foreign language. It went in one ear and out the other. "A dead body," I repeated. "Look, I saved it." I showed him the pictures I took. He scrolled back and forth and scoffed a little. He was laughing, as if I was telling a joke. I realized the light in the pictures wasn't the best, and it didn't help that I was holding my phone from a weird angle. It probably just looked like a storage bag covered in white sprinkles. "It's not a joke," I assured him. It's really there, right under the sink. Stuff like the toilet flushed. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked back up at Dan. His smile had faded a little, but I could see he wasn't understanding. Perhaps, in his world, what I was saying was impossible. So before Wallace got back, I leaned back and whispered, "Go see for yourself. Go back in and check under the sink." Wallace came back and sat down. Dan gave me another look and headed to the bathroom without a word. For the third time, I was alone with Wallace. This time, he could tell I was upset. I couldn't hide it. Not after talking to Dan like that. "You're really not looking well," said Wallace. "Maybe we shouldn't go out." "Maybe." I nodded. "We'll just see how this plays out." "What do you mean?" he asked. "How's what gonna play out?" Wallace leaned over the poker table, keeping the cheese knife close to his body. I listened for Dan to react to the body in the bathroom, but there was nothing. Maybe he was already calling for help while I kept Wallace busy. "You know, whatever," I said. "Whatever happens, happens." "Whatever happens, happens?" Wallace laughed. "Mister, I need to know where bathrooms are at all times. Want to tell me whatever happens, happens? Now I know you're not right." "Well, maybe I'm not," I said, throwing my arms up. "Maybe I'm not okay. Is something bothering you?" He pressed on. "Is it something I did?" "I think it might be." I nodded. "Might be something you did." I've never been the kind of person to confront people out of the blue, especially not people I cared about. But I'd had a couple of drinks, and I wasn't feeling like myself anymore. Hell, nothing felt real anymore. It's like I'd fallen into some kind of bizarro world where one of my best friends had turned into a cold-blooded murderer. But there was no mistaking what I'd seen. Dan got out of the bathroom, and in the split second where Wallace looked up, I snatched the cheese knife from the plate, leaving the cheddar. There was the harsh noise of metal scraping against ceramic as I jumped out of my chair. Holding the knife as a weapon, Wallace got up from his chair and stepped away from the table. Dan backed away with a quiet, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I pointed at Dan with my free hand. "Dan, call the police," I said. "Call them right now." "What are you doing?" Wallace yelled. "Put the damn knife down." "So you can take it?" I snapped back. "You want to put me under the sink too?" Wallace shook his head, as if trying to rattle the confusion out of his mind. He took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "What exactly is the problem here?" he asked. "The problem is you got a goddamn body stuffed under the sink." Wallace cocked his head, and with a shrug, he said, "So?" Out of all the things he could have said, that's the one that surprised me the most. I thought he was going to defend himself or straight up deny it. But no, he didn't seem to mind this at all. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't know what to feel. "Dan saw it too," I said. "I took photos." I showed him. "Yeah," said Dan. "Yeah, I saw it." I turned to him. Dan was lined up against the wall, holding his hands like he was at gunpoint. Dan shot Wallace with an accusatory look. "I can't believe you stuffed the damn thing under the sink," he said, shaking his head. "That's lazy, even for you." My feet felt light, and my head heavy. It's like there were so many thoughts pushing into my head that I had trouble keeping my neck straight. Like I was being crushed from the top down. A darkness sunk straight through my heart and settled in my stomach, burning with gastric acid all the way down. "It's temporary," said Wallace. "Bad timing. Haven't had a chance to move it." "You need my truck, Wally?" Dan asked. "It's a bitch to clean, you know." "Should be good," Wallace shrugged. "It's just ash and bone. Won't leave a trace." They were talking like I wasn't there, like I wasn't holding a knife. Did one of them have some kind of hidden weapon? How could they not see me as a threat? I unlocked my phone and dialed the emergency services, but left my hand off the call button. That got their attention. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," said Dan. Are you serious? What do you think you're doing?" I'm not letting you turn murder into a fucking joke. That's what I'm doing. Holy shit, he's blanking, said Wallace. Oh fuck, you're right, said Dan. He is blanking. I held the phone up with my finger on the call button. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't make sense of what they were saying. I didn't know what to do. And I was just as ready to start swinging that knife around as I was calling for help. My nerves were a coin toss from fight or flight, or come what may. You're not making any sense, I wheezed. None of you. Wallace held up an open hand. Look, I'm sorry, he said. We didn't realize what was going on. This has got to be traumatic. Just put the phone down, said Dan. You can keep the knife. I shook my head. I did nothing. No calling, no cutting, no yelling or screaming. I just observed them and waited for a solution to reveal itself. Wallace stepped out from behind the poker table. The reality show was still rolling in the background. Two girls with wide accents arguing loudly over a birthday cake. We're celebrating, said Wallace slowly. You remember that part, right? Yeah, I said. We're going out. Guys' night out, yeah, he continued. Do you know why? I've been having a hard time, I said. You wanted to take me out. That's not a celebration, Dan added. That's just being good people. This is a celebration. Do you remember what we're celebrating? Wallace asked. Do you know that part? I didn't, thinking back on it. There was a bit of muddled cloud over that part. It had come pretty much from nowhere. The guys had invited me out, and I accepted without a second thought, like we'd done it before. But I couldn't remember when, or why. Sometimes when you do things you wouldn't do, we blank out, Wallace added. Happens to a lot of newbies. What the fuck kind of sentence is that? I let out a joyless laugh. The knife in my hand shook, and long after the laugh was gone, the shaking remained. You're not you, said Dan from the sidelines. None of us are. We're different. Wallace nodded. Better. Wallace pointed to the bathroom, taking a step closer. That's me in there, he said. The real me. But I'm real too. Wallace took another step forward and extended a hand. Give me something, he said. The phone or the knife or both. But you gotta trust me. I don't even understand what you're saying, I said. How the hell am I supposed to trust you? Because you know me. You know Dan. You've known us long before we got here. We're the same brood, man. Brothers. Brood, Dan scoffed, shaking his head. I don't like that word. Dan, not the time, Wallace said, rolling his eyes. Dan held up a hand apologetically and shuffled away from the wall. Wallace was right in front of me. He slowly placed a hand on the blade of my knife. The Valley girls on TV were laughing now. Drama solved. The cake was safe. I can tell we helped you, said Wallace. I can tell that you're the youngest, but no matter the words, you can still feel it. You know you can trust us. But I didn't know shit. I had a murderer wrapping his hands around my weapon, and I was hesitating. I couldn't stop that image. That black shirt, those dark jeans, the plop of fat maggots hitting the ceramic tiles. You want me to show you? Wallace asked. You want to know the truth? I didn't. I really didn't. I just wanted to go home and forget that entire night. To go back to the time where we were just gonna go out for drinks. Guys' night. And yet, I released the knife and nodded. Wallace dropped it on the floor. Yeah, I sobbed. I want the truth. We went out the back door. Dan was in no position to drive, but I saw him lean over a fence and do this strange hulking movement. After a couple of seconds, his stomach rippled, and a transparent glob of jelly rolled out of him like a hairball. Then he was fine. Sober even. No slurred speech, no swinging movement. He went and got his pickup truck. Wallace cleaned up the maggots and wrapped the cabinet in plastic. Once Dan got back, The two of them carried it to the truck and secured it with bright plastic straps. All three of us had to pile in the front seat, sitting side by side. Any other night of my life, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. Now it felt like surrender. They played music and talked. Dan had to call his work friends and tell them we weren't coming to the club. Wallace seemed a bit peeved about it, but there was too much to do. At least, that's what it sounded like. Dan's position at the bottling plant allowed him to access a warehouse, and with that, he could get to some shipping containers. We rolled past a gate with an armed guard. Dan seemed to know him. They waved at each other. Apparently, it wasn't that unusual for Dan to drop by unannounced, late at night on a weekend. We parked. Wallace and Dan got the cabinet. As they did, they gave me a tired look. "You might as well help," said Wallace. "You gonna have us carry this on our own?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I was still gonna call for help or not. It felt like a part of my consciousness had taken a physical beating. Like the decision-making part of my brain was swollen. The two of them just stood there, waiting for me to lend a hand. They weren't gonna move until I did, so I helped them. I could feel something frail and dry rolling around in the cabinet as we moved, like bags of old cigars. 3 guys and an improvised coffin. Our footsteps echoed against the metal walls. Hollow containers in neutral colors, most of which were rusted or scheduled for destruction. We went to the far end of the building and put down the cabinet. We all took a moment to catch our breaths. The container in front of us was just like all the others. The same neutral color, similar serial numbers, same company logo, a faded blue sunflower print. Dan stepped up and clicked the lock open, then gave me some space, and Wallace tapped me on the shoulder. "When you're ready." The container was slightly ajar. Dan was using the little flashlight from his keychain, casting my shadow across the door. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I could walk away and never know for sure, or I could fling those doors wide open. There might be nothing inside, and I'd have 2 of my friends murder me. Or there would be something inside that I would be unable to understand. But as long as I was out there, with my hand on the door, I could be anything. A guy being pranked, a victim, a murderer. As long as that door stays closed, I was all of it at once. But I had to know which one was real. The door swung open with a rusty whine. There was a lot of plastic and a lot of chemicals, vacuum-sealed bags. A hand on my shoulder urged me forward. Another hand reached ahead, pointing at one of the corners. "There," Dan said. "That's you." And with that, I broke into 1,000 screaming pieces. I hadn't just been in a dark place these last few weeks. It had been a real, actual space. Somewhere dark and fractured. Somewhere you are born and dying in the same heartbeat, dreaming of a life. And somewhere in there, I dreamt of me. A life not my own, but someone else's. But I dreamt it so clearly, so vividly, that I wanted it as my own. I remember barking, a hunch skulking behind the trash cans, how I'd practiced standing and talking and walking, changing. Dan and Wallace helped me. I knew them from before. There was a body in that container that looked like me. It had succumbed to my dream, and it had been replaced. And I'd wanted so bad for that dream to be real that I'd forgotten. I'd blanked. There was a body, and that body was me. Those were my eyes, unblinking as another fly drank itself fat off my cold skin. "You'll get there, buddy," Dan muttered. "Take your time." My mind cycled. I was real, but I wasn't real. I had thoughts, but they weren't mine. I'd done all I could to get away from that dark, but it was still there. The more I thought about it, the more I felt it. I stood there on my knees, looking at my broken face lit up by a faint pocket light, my eyes looking back at me from behind a sheet of plastic. But those were never my eyes. In so many ways, we were alike, but we weren't the same. Wallace and Dan took me home later that night. They closed the container and locked it back up. We weren't going to use it anymore, and there were no more bodies to hide. The gang was all here, and this ordeal was going to disappear forever. From that night on, there would be nothing and no one that could say it wasn't me. They could run every test on my body, ask me any question, and check every atom of my being. I am me, but every other way, I am not. It's such an alien thought to live with. This one thing is such a small part of my life, but it changes everything. I know I'm no different from what I dreamed I'd be, but that doesn't change the fact that it never happened to me. I wasn't the one who graduated high school or got my driver's license. That was another body, one that I dreamed of, and yet I know all about it. I could point my math teacher out in a crowd, even though I'd never really seen the man with these eyes. I'm just a copy, but Dan and Wallace was different. Not only were they my real friends, they were also something more, something other. And even on that level, we are family. I know there are others, but they're not like us. They're not brood. They want more than to step out of the dark. It's been some time since poker night. The guys originally took me out to celebrate my arrival, or crossing the line. I was the last addition to the group, and we'd finished the replacement just a couple of days prior. I'd gone so far into my new life that I completely blanked on what we'd done. I still can't see it clearly. It's like smoke in a nightmare. We still play poker sometimes, not to celebrate, but just for fun. I still go to work and laugh and joke. I can enjoy a cold beer and watch my favorite show, but there's always that nagging voice in the back of my mind. Am I really enjoying this? Or am I convincing myself that I like this? Am I laughing because that's what I dreamt I should? Or because I find something funny? Where does what's real end and I begin? I don't know why I'm posting this. It's just throwing a message in a bottle into the void of the internet, I suppose. Hell, I haven't even used our real names. Maybe I'm just lying about all of it. Maybe it's just as make-believe as my whole existence. I suppose if there's something I want you to take with you, it is that looks can deceive. Anything can be taken for granted, and anything can be a lie. The greatest perceptible truth of a human life can turn out to be nothing. So maybe we should just enjoy what we have, for as long as we can allow ourselves to have it, even if it's just a poker night with the guys. I guess, as the song goes on, life is but a dream. Back when I grew up in rural Minnesota, my mother wanted me to keep in touch with my Scandinavian roots. We haven't lived in the Nordic countries for 3 generations, but there are still a couple of things that stick around, behavioral quirks mostly, and a couple of traditions that have been with our family for as long as anyone can remember. Putting porridge out for the forest gnomes was one thing. Mom used to trick me with these dolls that she'd put in the snow and point to, saying, "Don't move too fast, you'll scare them. And let's not talk about dancing around the maypole. That stuff's just embarrassing." But the most peculiar tradition is the one about A Midsummer Night's Dream. I know, that's a Shakespeare title, but it's also a traditional Scandinavian thing. It goes a little something like this. On the evening of midsummer, you are to collect several kinds of wildflowers. Then you bundle them up and put them under your pillow. If you do, you are supposed to dream of your one true love. Now, I have 3 sisters. They were all about romance and predestination, and I couldn't have cared less if I wanted to. But every year, they'd walk hand in hand, collecting wildflowers and putting them under their pillows. And I was too young to wander off on my own. I had to stick around. That is, until they decided it was my turn. It was my oldest sister who made the call. She was 12 and I'd just turned 7, but she figured the earlier, the better. "You have to tell us what she looks like," she said. "Like, if she's tall or thin or even fat." "I bet she's fat," said my second oldest sister. "Statistically, she's Chinese or Indian," said the other. "That's where there are most girls." I tried to ignore them, but their cackling got on my nerves. They gathered up some silky aster, blue-eyed grass, silverleaf, wild bergamot, blue sunflowers, and ground plum, but couldn't get the 7th one. They looked around but couldn't find one. I just wanted to go home, so I picked up the first thing I saw, sticking out next to a rusted-out barrel. "How about this one?" I said, holding up a yellow sunflower with a black spot. "That's a black-eyed Susan," said my oldest sister. "You're gonna marry a Susan," grinned the other. "Little Susie gonna love you," sang the last. I rolled my eyes so hard that they almost popped out of my head as they cackled and teased. Putting my hair up in a bow, they bundled up the wildflowers and made me sleep with them under my pillow. I didn't notice anything strange at first. Just a night like any other. You have such vivid dreams when you're a kid. Like everything just happens faster. You even sleep faster. But this was something else entirely. It wasn't just a dream. It was an experience. And the worst part is, I didn't even remember it. I just remembered it was bad. Really, really bad. It was so bad that I completely blocked it out. I don't even remember waking up. I just remember laying in the bathtub submerged in cold water. I looked up at my 3 sisters. They looked terrified. My throat was hoarse, and I was wide awake, but I couldn't even remember going to bed. "Does it hurt?" my oldest asked. Her voice was different, lower, careful. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm okay." "It sounded like it hurt," she continued. "Like it really hurt. I think it was a bad dream." "Was it her?" asked my youngest sister. "Did you dream of her?" I couldn't tell. It was just a dark space in the back of my mind that made my pulse shiver when I thought about it. And yet, I knew the answer. "Yeah," I said. "It was Black-Eyed Susan. Now, I've been teased by my sister my whole life, but they never teased me about Black-Eyed Susan. They'd never seen me like that. I'd woken up screaming at the top of my lungs, rolling around on the floor. They thought I was having a seizure. They took me to the bathroom while my mom called an ambulance. We didn't talk much about it. They never had me checked for epilepsy, and I was perfectly healthy otherwise. They talked about it being some kind of allergic reaction, but I'd never seen a reaction like that. Over time, we came to this unspoken conclusion that those wildflowers gave me the worst nightmare of my life. And in that nightmare, I saw my one true love, Black-Eyed Susan. I wouldn't think much about that night over the years to come. It became this distant memory, like your first cold. But every now and then, particularly around midsummer, I would try to remember what that dream had been like, and something inside me would sink into this bottomless hole in my chest. It teased me. I could concentrate, and I'd see it, but I didn't want to. To have forgotten was a blessing, and I knew better than to challenge it. But it's a weird headspace to live in, to have a concept such as true love and marriage, so closely associated with trauma, especially since all the other couples in my life were perfectly fine role models. My mother and father were an extraordinary couple, and while my sisters had some dating life drama, nothing bad ever really happened to them. So as I got into my teenage years, I didn't want to chase girls and flirt. I didn't want to fall in love. I joked about it a lot, but the feeling of meeting my one true love felt like throwing my soul down an endless pit. I tried to rationalize it away. It was just a stupid phase, a quirk. It became like a fun party story to tell in my late teens. It was funny in a way, saying I used to believe in such things. But there was an asterisk stuck to that story every time I told it. A little white lie. I never stopped believing in it. It started to really bother me when I was about 17. At that point, I'd been in short relationships, and I'd been in love. But I couldn't stop thinking that it wasn't real, that true love was out there, and that it was terrifying, something that would make my heart sink into my stomach. So I decided to just bite the bullet and try the whole thing again, to face my fears. So that midsummer, I put together 7 types of wildflowers again, ending with a Black Susan. As kids, we're very good at handling pain, or at least we're resilient. We have time to heal. But when you're 17, it hits differently. When I went to bed that night, I had cold sweats, and I couldn't stop thinking about what was waiting behind my closed eyes. Would there be a reaction at all? Or had I wasted all this time being anxious about nothing? I closed my eyes and tried not to think about it. I counted down from 100, then 200. I twisted and turned, trying to get the sweaty covers to stop sticking to my skin. At the slightest stretch, my eyes would pop open. I'd get this ache in my face from trying to keep them closed. But after hours, something clicked. My muscles relaxed, and I caught a whiff of the wildflowers from under my pillow. And something inside me screamed at me to turn back, to open my eyes. But it was too late. It felt like looking at the bottom of a pool, but straight ahead. A relative shimmer, ethereal, but physical at the same time. Like a night sky that you can push your hands through. I fumbled with my hands, trying to find something to hold on to. There was this swirl in the back of my head, like having a large drink on an empty stomach. Something reached for me and touched my fingertips. Something as hard as fingernails. It poked and prodded me from different angles. A strange voice seeped through, neutral, genderless, and with an unusual pronunciation. "Where have you been?" it asked. I tried to regain my footing, but there was nothing to hold on to. Just these protrusions from the dark. Finally, I felt myself slowing down. A steadiness, control. Something came out of the dark, eyes so black that their head looked hollow against the night. A vaguely human skull connected to an infinite mass, like a broken flower growing out of cracked concrete. Muscle and vein contracting and compounding at every angle. Ripples of flesh with every offset heartbeat. It's been so long. Something wrapped around my ankle, tightening. "Come home." My eyes snapped open, but I wasn't awake. I could feel her wrapped around my ankle. I pulled away the covers and watched my foot turn blue. It was bending, and I felt nothing. Then the bone snapped. I've never experienced something like that. I've never broken a bone. And experiencing a trimallear fracture in the comfort of your own bed is inhuman. It hurts so bad you lose bladder control, and I couldn't do anything but fall out of bed and writhe on the floor. But the pain wouldn't go away. I just screamed. I tried to reach for my phone, but it's like it refused to let me reach it. A neighbor heard me. Help came. It wouldn't take long for the leg to heal, but bones mend all the time. But true love doesn't. I pushed the thought of love and marriage out of my life for over a decade. I would shy away from coy smiles and flowery laughter. Some people thought I had a problem with my sexuality. Others thought I was under some kind of religious repression. I tried to explain that relationships just weren't my thing, but it's hard to explain it without a reason. If I was really pressed about it, I'd say it was childhood trauma. That usually stopped the questions. I'd do this for years, a string of short-term relationships where I kept hoping and praying I wouldn't fall in love. Anything to keep me away from that dark place. I couldn't tell what was going to happen if I met someone who'd make me feel things. Real things. But life isn't so simple. It would take me years, but when I turned 31, I met her. Lilia hit me like a summer's breeze the first time I talked to her. It was a birthday party, and she was invited by a mutual friend of ours. Lilia had been working overtime and forgotten all about the party, so she joined in at the last minute. She showed up in an oversized hoodie and yesterday's jeans, spending most of the night at the snack table looking at her phone. Her enthusiasm started and stopped at bobbing her head to the music. When I saw that we were out of pretzels and I went up to talk to her. "Looking for snacks?" I asked. "Your mom's a snack." She snapped back. "All right, yeah, but I was talking about the pretzels." She looked at me like I'd struck gold. She'd been so hell-bent on the idea that I was coming up to hit on her that it never crossed her mind that she'd eaten a whole bowl of salty pretzels. She snort-laughed, apologized, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew it was trouble. I liked her. Lilia was a work-from-home back-end developer. She spent most of her days trying to steer her team through rough deadlines and absurd last-minute changes. She explained it as trying to teach cats algebra while falling out of an airplane. She cycled through periods of insane stress to weeks of coasting, which she'd made into an absurd routine. Clearly something she couldn't keep up forever. We didn't start dating right away. We chatted a bit and found out we had a lot in common. She'd been dating this one guy since she was 14 years old, and had only recently turned single, so she wasn't eager to get back on the market. She didn't mind the vague trauma. She just liked being around me. I think our friends realized we were dating long before Lilia or I did. We just spent time together until one day when we didn't want it to stop. Still, I couldn't help but think of Black-Eyed Susan. No matter how soothing Lilia's snores were, I could still lay awake at night. There was a warmth in my chest as I imagined the smell of wildflowers from my pillow, an ache in my leg where I could touch the scars. If I were truly to fall in love, what would happen? Those nights came more often, from once every 6 months or so to every week. After having dated for about a year, Lilia was eager to help me get over the whole thing. She knew it was trauma, and she knew I didn't want to talk about it, but she couldn't let it go. And of course she couldn't. She was in a loving relationship with a man who couldn't say he loved her, and all she knew was that something had happened. It got to the point where it was driving a wedge between us. She wanted to help, and I wanted her to understand, and I could only think of one way to show her. I had to do it again. On midsummer, we went outside to pick wildflowers. Lilia was excited, but her smile faded when she felt how serious I was. I did what I'd done every other time. I picked 6 types, and a final flower would pop up out of nowhere. And of course, it'd be the Black-Eyed Susan. I bundled them all up. I could feel a phantom pain cutting into my leg, which gave me a limp. "So what are these for?" she asked. "For sleep," I said, "and I'm gonna need your help." "Sure, yeah, whatever you need. If it looks bad, I need you to wake me up." "How do I know if it's bad?" I shook my head and took her by the hand. "You'll know." I did some preparations. I had gauze and painkillers. Lilia was prepared to call for help if necessary. She still had no idea what was going on, but I could tell she was nervous. Then again, so was I. The problem was, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, and she watched me. After about an hour, she crawled up next to me. She knew it was something that happened when I slept, but she wanted to calm me down. "I need you to see this," I said. "It's okay," she whispered. "Go to sleep. Promise you'll keep watch." "I promise." I didn't turn my head to look. I trusted her. So I closed my eyes let my breathing slow, and felt my head fill with the smell of wildflowers. It was like waking up again, a mild tingle covering my body, like being draped in spider webs. I blinked and blinked, but it was all black. A long, drawn-out breath echoed like a field of sighing flowers. Beautiful. A growth coming out of the dark, translucent, like living glass hardening into soft marble. A woman, dragging her legs through the night like she was trudging through a swamp. She grabbed me by the hand, pulling me along. It felt like I was carried through a current. I could see the bedroom from above. I lay there, and Lilia was sitting next to me. I can't really explain what it felt like. Sort of like watching your reflection blink. I could see her struggling to stay awake, nodding off and on. She was trying so hard. "Is that what beautiful looks like?" Black-eyed Susan asked. "I don't even know what you are," I said. "Of course you do," she said. "I am your one true love." The words slithered, a drawn-out S poisoned the air. I tried not to look at her. It was like the opposite of staring into a sun. The light in your eyes began to die, and you can feel yourself growing colder, slower. "You can't be," I said. "It's impossible." "But I am," she said. "You love me." She turned her attention to the room hovering in front of us. I could see little tendrils creep under the furniture, reaching for Lilia and me. Long finger-like limbs and layered scales, bending at painful angles. One pulled down her phone. Another moved a chair. Two of them struggled to move the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Passing time." One of the tendrils closed around my stomach. There was pressure, like someone tightening a belt. It cut into my hips. Before the pain, I could feel a slight pop. "If you love me, why are you hurting me?" I asked. "How else are you going to get used to it?" she asked back. "Get used to what?" She turned to me, breath reeking of ammonia with every spit of a word. "Us." A hand closed around my neck. My eyes flung open. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't feel my legs. I flailed with my arm, reaching for Lilia. She got out of bed, only to find that her phone was gone. "What's wrong?" she asked. "What's happening?" She had to cover her mouth when she saw my neck. She grabbed my arm, but the moment she did, something took hold of her. In the corner of my eye, I saw her getting pulled into the other room, clawing at the carpet with a terrified shriek. My left arm rose out of the bed, as if carried by an unseen string. Two of my fingers popped out of their sockets, like a painful countdown. I couldn't scream. I could barely think. No oxygen. Lilia came running back and grabbed me. She pulled on my arm, and something let go. I fell out of bed, gasping for air as she cradled my head in her arms. I could see the color returning to my hands as two fingers turned purple. I didn't feel a thing, but I would in a couple of seconds. "Hold on," Lilia said. Her phone was gone. She bandaged my fingers and tried to keep them straight. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry." She just shook her head, trying to process what had happened. There were no words. We just stayed there on the floor. But I could see something in the corners of the room, little quirks and shades. Something was waiting for me to let my guard down. "What's hurting you?" she asked. "Was it?" Something broke in me as I swallowed my words. But Lilia deserved the truth. "I think she loves me." Over the coming weeks, I tried my best to explain. Lilia was terrified. She'd never seen anything like it, and there was no explanation that could settle her nerves. It's one thing to know someone you care about has trauma, but it's another thing entirely to experience something impossible. That can make or break you. But Lilia didn't break. She started asking questions. Why was I targeted? What was this thing? What did it want? But things were getting strange. It's as if thinking about Black Susan had brought her closer to us, in a physical, literal way. Like we were building towards something. I would spot movement in the shadows. I'd notice furniture out of place and hear creaking doors in the middle of the night. And of course, it had to be her. She was playing with me. Lilia would stay up at night, reading about various Scandinavian traditions. The cast iron scissors under my pillow, the midsummer pole, the year walk, trolls, elves, dwarves, and gnomes. She gave me lists of things to ask my parents about, to see if our family had been targeted by something ancient or evil. But weeks would come and go, and we wouldn't be anywhere close to an answer, and the shadows would grow longer. Things would disappear, and every night, when I closed my eyes, I'd catch a whiff of earthy wildflowers. Things would quickly progress beyond tricks and shadows. At one point, I was tripped while walking down a flight of stairs. Another time, something pressed down on the gas pedal, sending me straight through a red light. It's a miracle no one was hurt. Lilia wouldn't go unscathed. Electronics would break or go missing. Odd sounds would wake her up at night. She told me that sometimes she'd see a silhouette outside the window, as if someone was trying to catch a peek of us. Every time she looked closer, it would turn out to be fallen leaves or a peculiar branch. It was stressful, but there wasn't really an option. What else could we do but stick together and love one another? I don't remember the moment we moved in together. It just made sense, since we spent all our time together anyway. She just moved more and more of her stuff in, and all of a sudden, her place was pretty much empty. So yeah, we lived together. It wasn't really a conscious decision. Lilia had a couple rough ideas of what that thing might be. She had a binder with ideas ranging from Arthurian mythology to djinn, and some kind of Polish bird demon. None of them fit it perfectly though, and frankly, it was such an odd thing for it all to be tied to this one ancient tradition. How could this thing be my true love? What was I missing? We figured it had to be something connected to that very first night, back when I was a kid, when they had put me in the bathtub to wake me up. For a full year, all we did was try and make it to the next day. It affected pretty much every aspect of our lives. The way we slept at night, the way we cooked, the way we did our laundry. There'd always be something messing up the rhythm of the day. It exhausted us, not just mentally and physically, but socially. We stopped going out. Hell, we barely even talked. Instead, we kept our heads down and tried not to think about it too much, silently hoping for the problem to solve itself as Lilia's binder gathered dust. But once the next midsummer came around, there was a difficult decision to be had. We can't live like this. She'd sat me down at the kitchen table. The light bulb had burned out somehow, despite only being 2 weeks old. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wouldn't blame you if..." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "You know that. So what do we do?" She looked around. The kitchen faucet was leaking again. "I suppose we ought to try something," she said. "You got any suggestions?" "She could kill us," I said. "We can't go there." "Maybe we don't have a choice." I just sat there in the dark, counting the seconds. She was right, of course, but that didn't mean I had to like it. As midsummer came, we decided we would do this together. We got a single large pillow and gathered the flowers together. We didn't say a word. We just walked among the wildflowers as a low rumble lingered on the horizon, a damp taste in the air as the storm brewed. But to me, all I could see was the woman I loved, and how she carefully brushed her hands against the tall grass. Even now, she could find something to appreciate. Tradition, ritual, and myth be damned. At that moment, there wasn't a force in the world that can convince me that. She was anything but my actual true love. We rounded out our wildflowers with the black-eyed Susan. It was hidden next to a rusted-out barrel, as if trying its best to hide. But like every other year I'd done this, I'd find one. And with all 7 wildflowers in hand, we bundled them up and wandered home, hand in hand. We hugged each other tight as we went to bed. Some way, somehow, we would make it through the night. We had to. When I opened my eyes, something felt different. I thought I was standing in sand, but it was more like a fine concrete dust. The moon covered most of the night sky, but I couldn't see any stars. There were black trees in the distance, leafless and skeletonized by years of thirst. Along with the horizon was a single large tree, tall enough to almost reach the moon itself. An apocalyptic vision, if anything. "Who are you?" A melodic voice, kind but unsure. I turned around. "Lilia?" My first thought was that she looked taller, but that wasn't it. She was the same as always. It was me that had gotten shorter. My hands were smaller. I looked down at the 7-year-old version of myself, still dressed in my most comfortable childhood jammies. Lilia didn't really sound any different, but a child's ears hear things in other ways. She had the most beautiful voice. "It's me," I said. "Somehow, you're really cute." She smiled. "But I don't get it." "I don't either. Maybe we're not supposed to." "Maybe." We wandered down a trail, hand in hand. There was no one around. No wind blowing through the dead plains. No birds in the sky. No chirping cicadas, and no rustling leaves. Just feet on dust. "There's no one here," I said. "This can't be it. Did we do it wrong?" She asked. "I don't think so. She's usually here by now." Lilia blinked, looking around. Then something dark settled over her eyes. "What if she is?" She let go of me and brushed her arms up and down in a self-hug, something she usually did when stressed. We wandered around for what felt like hours. Nothing happened. No one came to disturb us. It was just her, me, and nothingness. No black-eyed Susan, and nothing to tear us apart. "Does this mean you're my true love?" she asked. "I mean, I'm dreaming of you. That would make you mine too." I smiled. "I thought that was occupied." I thought so too, but there was no one there to challenge that claim. We just smiled at one another. That had to be it. Despite it all, something good had to come out of this. But no matter where we went, or for how long, nothing happened. We started to worry. We weren't waking up. We didn't get hungry or thirsty or tired. It was just this complete stage of emptiness. We would walk down forgotten paths for what felt like hours, strolling past sand-burnt concrete ruins. I don't know how much time passed. It might have been days. It might have been months. It was impossible to tell. And Lilia always had this amazing ability to make every moment pass by in a flash. She was impossible not to love. Even then, and even there, we'd make jokes and laugh. Though I couldn't get over the feeling of being stuck in my younger self. You don't realize how much you've changed until you step back into old shoes like that. Then I noticed something. A flicker of yellow. Right there, behind a rusted-out old barrel, was a black-eyed Susan. The same yellow flower I'd found on that fateful midsummer night as a kid. I don't know how I recognized it, but I did. It was the same flower. It had to be. I picked it up and showed it to Lilia. "Strange, huh?" I said. "Only one of these I've seen around." "I wonder what it does," she said. "You think it means?" Her voice cut out. The light warped in front of me, blurring like I was watching through a thin layer of rustling water. I could feel a tingle in my eyes. Lilia looked different. further away. "Don't go," she called out. "What are you doing?" "I'm not. I just picked this. I held it out and dropped it, giving her one last flower. We drifted apart. Something shifted. My head rolled back, and I felt this intense heat settling into my head. Then a coolness. Something trying to lower my temperature. Young voices, terrified. Lilia drifting further away, screaming at me to stay with her. Her voice goes from beautiful to desperate to something else. She would scream how much she loved me, and then scream at how much she hated me. I would leave her in that place for what would equate to eternities, for her to twist and turn in that place where she'd have nothing but her thoughts and regrets, where a starless sky would seep into her, whispering things to do, ways she would play whenever I returned, her head spinning with tales of Jinn and Mars and demons. It would just be seconds passing as I felt her disappear, but in those seconds, there would be eons, long enough for a body to forget what humans looked like, for a mind to forget what love is supposed to be, for a word or a phrase to change. True love. An ammonia-reeking scream reflected off of fractured space as she reached for me, trying to pull me back through the breaking light, a hand so warm that it burned my face. How could I be so cruel as to leave her for endless time to suffer? How could I be so selfish? Black-eyed Susan, Lilia, my one true love. My head burst through the water as I looked up at my 3 sisters. I was 7 years old and still in my jammies, submerged in the bathtub of my childhood home. And as healthy young minds do, my memories healed themselves, sealing away a trauma for me to uncover years down the line. Life would turn out the same way. Awkward teenage years, short relationships, and I would come back to that broken place in time again, and she would play her games, reminding me of the betrayal she felt, and I wouldn't understand. That is, until one night, when I woke up alone. We'd gone to bed together, but only one had made it back. I'd live a life twice, and I hadn't even realized it. I stumbled into the shower, set it to cold, and collapsed. I could just think of one thing to say. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Another view of the world from behind a shimmer, be it warm tears or running water. Today, I'm 47, never married, no serious dating. I go back to Lilia every year, hoping I can find something to remind me of what she used to be. I've tried bringing things along, something to bring her back with me. I've yet to find anything useful. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I try to stay a little longer, but the pain is unbearable. I suspect one day she'll kill me, and if I don't come back, I suppose that's the only way this can end. I try not to think about it, but when I do, I try to convince myself that I will end up the same way as her. Maybe we can find solace in our madness. Maybe we'll live together in a paradise of dust and strange moons. I don't know. I don't think that old tradition just shows you true love. I think it will take you to a place where you can meet. But perhaps that place isn't what it used to be. Maybe there used to be more flowers and dancing. I've asked my sisters about what they've seen the times they've done this. All they tell me about is handsome men and blue skies. I guess we don't all go to the same place. After all, true love isn't the same for everyone. If there truly is someone for everyone, well, then we must face some hard facts. They could live across the world. They could have passed away. Or maybe they're just not what you expected. But the older I get, the less I worry. Maybe I'll wake up in that bathtub a third time, years from now. And if not, then at least I get to see her again. There must be something of Lilia left in Black-Eyed Susan. There has to be, or else she wouldn't still be my one true love. I want to tell you about the most turbulent time in my life. There was a 3-month period where my world just crumbled. The woman I was going to marry moved to Europe to pursue higher education. My father passed away from a sudden illness, and the imports company I worked for was uprooted and moved southwest to Cairo. I had no choice but to take what little life I had and follow the company. I signed up with an agency to help me find a place to stay. I had to get something fast or risk losing my job. It wasn't all bad though. By staying with the company when almost half the staff left, I had an increased seniority. I was reassigned to help with foreign contracts and overseeing customs agreements, meaning a lot of late-night phone calls and video conferences with people in distant countries. I was busy keeping my head above water. I tried to sleep as little as possible, as my heart hurt whenever things got too quiet. I devoted myself to my work, hoping my intrusive thoughts would quiet down over time. Because if they didn't, well, that was hell on earth. I was lucky. There was an opening for an apartment on short notice. The rent was surprisingly cheap, and it was a nice neighborhood. There was a notice about there being an adjoining shop downstairs, but that it had limited opening hours, and the rent was cheaper to compensate. I looked over the floor plan and couldn't find anything to complain about. 2 rooms, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a storage closet. It was all I needed. No one seemed to have anything bad to say about the owner either. Now, I could have signed up to look at the apartment before I signed the lease, but I was afraid I might lose my spot in the queue. It was a very attractive deal, both location-wise and rent-wise. To find a place like that on short notice, it's almost unheard of. The agency I'd used was equally surprised. "This never happens," one of them told me over the phone. "At the end of the day, it's up to you. But I can promise you that lightning won't strike twice." So yeah, I took it. The apartment building didn't really stand out. It was 3 floors tall with a smooth red exterior, white arched windows next to shaded balconies facing away from the sun, a little shop on the corner, and a set of ornate glass double doors leading to an entryway. There had been a couple of abandoned building sites on the way there, but this building was situated at the edge of a residential area, overlooking a pristine field of grass. It was beautiful. There was a bronze plaque hanging above the door. It was old, by the looks of it. "I bring you respite in the house of rest." That was a name I'd heard in passing. The building had an address, like everything else, but the locals seemed to refer to it as the House of Rest. I liked the sound of it. The entry was filled with beautiful handcrafted hexagon ceramic tiles. The floor must have been cleaned recently. I could almost see my reflection in it. There was a smooth breeze blowing through the hallway, and it's as if all the hustle and bustle of the city stopped at the closing of the doors. It was quiet, so refreshingly quiet. The agency had given me a key to the mailbox, which is where I got the keys to the apartment. I was up on the 3rd floor. There was no elevator, but I figured I could do with some exercise. Good for the legs. There was a total of 16 apartments in the House of Rest. 6 on the bottom floor, 6 on the middle floor, and 4 on the top. The top apartments were a bit smaller, but were rumored to have the best view. The mailbox already had a piece of paper sticking out, an advertisement for a local restaurant. I could see the same blue-tinted paper sticking out of all the other mailboxes as well. I brought it along, figuring I might as well check it out someday after work. I didn't know anyone in town, but that wasn't going to stop me from celebrating a little. I opened the mailbox, got my keys, and went up to my apartment. I didn't see anyone else when I went up there, but I could hear them. People laughing, some playing the piano, a jingle from the radio playing in a distant room. It was lively, but not intrusive. I quite enjoyed it. Made me feel a little less alone. going up to the 3C apartment, I was a bit hesitant. I figured maybe it was all too good to be true. Maybe this was where the scam revealed itself. But no, I was wrong. It was wonderful. Bright open spaces with a view of the grassy field on the side, and a bustling street on the other. An old-fashioned kitchen, much like the one I grew up in. The apartment was clean, well kept, and there was a perfect corner space for my at-home office. I couldn't have asked for a better place. I could breathe a sigh of relief. Things were finally going my way. It took me a couple of days to get things up and running. I got some new furniture and carpets. I explored the neighborhood and tried the restaurant from the flyer. They had an amazing hibachi. Heaven. I could get most of my necessities from the corner shop. They were only open for a few hours every day, but the prices were low, and there was a discount for residents. The same old man tended the store every day. He must have been in his 70s, but he always had a smile on his face, and was so used to handling money that he could hand out exact change without looking at the bills. All in all, it was shaping up to be a great place to live. It really encompassed its namesake, the house of rest. My mother was very traditional, and I was raised with certain practices. Now, I'm from a younger generation, and a lot more flexible, but there are traditions and customs that I adhere to. For example, I attend a mosque for the Maghrib prayer, and I take some time out of my week to leave for Jumu'ah. I couldn't look my mother in the eye if I didn't, but it's also a comfort that I've grown accustomed to. It's a part of me. The first Jumu'ah I attended in that neighborhood surprised me. I saw no neighbors leave the house of rest to attend, so I first thought they might attend somewhere else. I asked one of the other attendants, but they weren't sure. They didn't know anyone who lived there except for the shopkeeper. People can have a lot of reasons not to attend, but the man had said something unusual, that he didn't know anyone who lived there. These were people from the neighborhood. How could no one know who lived there? Now, I was still settling into things. About 2 weeks passed, and I got into a comfortable routine. I had everything I needed, and no one bothered me. Sure, work was a hassle, but with the low rent I was paying, I could work less hours if I wanted to and still make it through the month with a bit to save. As the company was restructuring and hiring new people, I got some unexpected time off. This could have been a blessing, but it really wasn't. I had to stop myself from looking up what was going on in the life of the woman I'd lost. There were images and videos of her laughing, making friends, learning a new language. It was devastating, not only because I missed her, but because it made me question my choices. I lay awake at night wondering if I should have dropped everything and gone with her, but instead of dwelling on it, I tried to make the best of what I had. And in that space of thought, my mind kept wandering back to the curious fact of my neighbors. How come no one knew them? And why had I never seen them? I would hear them sometimes. I could hear them talking, laughing, cooking. They were behind the closed doors, but they were there. I was sure of it. I could hear individual conversations if I listened closely, but I didn't want to be rude. At night, walking around outside, I could see light shining from their windows. I could hear them walking around if I listened at their doors, but I couldn't find any names or phone numbers. Their mailboxes just had written addresses. There was no way to tell who lived where. But coming home from the shop on the corner, I noticed something curious. I'd lived at the house of rest for 4 weeks by then, and walking past the mailboxes, I noticed something blue sticking out. The same flyer for the restaurant that I'd received on that very first day was still there in every mailbox, but mine. No one had gone outside to check their mail for weeks. This caused me some concern. I decided to go down to the corner shop and ask the shopkeeper. I figured he'd worked there for years, maybe decades. He must have seen someone at some point. I waited until a couple of kids scurried out, and then I walked up to him. A small TV kept running in the corner, but he didn't pay any attention to it. His eyes were all on me, with an inviting smile. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you know any of the people in this building?" He looked at me with that same smile, but said nothing. "Excuse me?" I repeated. "Do you know them? Anyone?" He laughed a little and offered me a cigarette. I took it. "You don't speak?" I asked. "Little," he said. "Very little." He had this raspy old voice, and he pointed to his throat. I didn't press him about it, and instead went outside with him to enjoy my smoke. This man's beard was as ashen as his cigarette, but it fit him somehow. We just stood there for a moment, in silence, watching the busy street. People rushing by like the blood of a vein. There was something organic to it, and just stepping back for a moment calmed my nerves. I don't think it was the cigarette. It was the perspective. "Yafiu," the old man said. "Tupi." "Yafiu?" I repeated. "You know him?" The old man nodded, giving me a tap on the shoulder. As he went back inside, he looked back at me a final time. "Good man." Now, I didn't want to just barge in on Yafiu, but I figured I'd keep an eye out. I'd never set foot on the second floor. I had no reason to, but I couldn't help being curious about what kind of people my neighbors were. There had to be a reason why so many of them never left. Maybe there was another reason the rent was so cheap. Another week passed. I was getting into a routine where I rarely had to leave home. Apart from going out to pray, I pretty much never left my apartment. The corner shop had gotten some of my favorite food brands, so most food and drink that I wanted could be bought right downstairs. It really became my haven. Going outside and getting bombarded by the sounds of the city grew increasingly frustrating. I still had to leave for in-office work a couple of times a month, and when I did, I longed to get back home. One time, after returning from a long day, I saw a man leaving the house of rest. He was about my age, but wore surprisingly old-fashioned clothes. I walked up to him, trying to get his attention. He turned to me with a calm demeanor, his hands open. "Are you Yafiu?" I asked. "Yes, that's me," he said. "The old man at the corner told me you live here," I said. "I just moved in, so we're neighbors." "A neighbor?" He smiled. "What a blessing. Come, dinner's on me." There was no way to say no. I could tell he wouldn't accept it. And besides, this was the first neighbor I'd spoken to. I had to know more. Yafiu told me he lived in the house of rest with his wife Rashida for years. He was originally a repairman, but he'd sold his business for a hefty profit and was technically in between jobs. But there was no hurry. "With rents this cheap, I can live off that cell for years," he said. "I only do some extra work on the side when I want to get Rashida something special." "What about the others who live there?" I asked. "Do you know any other neighbors?" "No," he said, matter-of-factly. "We all keep to ourselves. It's our piece of heaven. No need to bother it." "It really is a house of rest," I said. "It really is. We're very blessed." Before we went our separate ways, there was one question I'd forgotten to ask. So before we said goodbye, I turned to him. "I have to ask," I said. "What were you doing today?" He turned to me with a cheeky smile. "I must confess, I have a vice," he said. "I get a bottle of red wine for my wife and a pack of smokes. The good brand, not the cheap stuff from the store. It's my only indulgence, I swear." "So that's it? A bottle and some cigarettes? Don't underestimate the little things," he said. "They are the best and worst things in life." There wasn't much to say about that. He had a bottle he'd brought along, a fancy brand that he'd gotten from downtown. As Yafiu turned to leave, he looked back a final time and waved. "If you smoke indoors, sit at the open window," he said. "You can't smoke inside, but they don't check the open windows." As he wandered off, I assumed he was talking about the owners, but that was another thing. I'd never met them either. But what did he mean by them checking the windows? Who did? When? In the late hours of the night, when I was working at my office desk, I would think about that. What did Yafeyu mean? Was it just a friendly reminder to keep the apartment in good shape? Or was it something more literal? I couldn't tell. Were the owners that strict? I tried to go and talk to him a couple of times, but he never opened the door. I figured he was busy or out doing something, but without a clear answer, my mind was left wandering. So in a sudden lapse of judgment, I decided to challenge this thought head on. So one night, I stood by my closed window and lit a cigarette. Now, I can't say for sure what I was expecting. I don't think I was expecting anything at all, really. Maybe someone would ask me to put it out, but no, nothing happened. I was a bit disappointed, really, but as I turned to flick the ash off, I noticed something. The soothing breeze turning to an icy sting, the flavored smoke in my mouth turning sour. There was this warmth on my shoulder, as if someone was looking at my neck. I could feel my heart skip a beat, as if something was judging me from afar, like I was about to get scolded, like a frightened child. I stepped away from the window, hastily putting away the rest of my cigarettes. Imagination or not, I couldn't explain that sense of unease, as if breaking the rules wasn't just something frowned upon, but a fundamental wrong. Then, footsteps. It was loud and fast coming down the hall. The other tenants had been sleeping for hours, and yet, they somehow seemed even more quiet. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I didn't dare to move. Something in the door cracked, as a great weight pushed against it, making the hinges creak. I took a few steps forward, waving my hands as if to clear the air. "I'm sorry," I called out. "I'm sorry, it won't happen again. I'm throwing them out. Sorry, I'm sorry." The creaking stopped. I just stood there, watching, waiting for the footsteps to continue. Then the hinges creaked again, as the weight pushed off the door, and someone retreated into the building. I couldn't unlearn this. There was something in that apartment building watching me. While the house of rest was an amazing place to live, I couldn't stay with that kind of pressure hanging over my head. I reached out to the agency about getting a new place, but they warned me it could be a matter of months. So for now, I had to keep my head down and hope for the best. After that night, I would notice little details around the building. For example, there were drag marks on the tiles of the top floors by the stairs leading to the roof, as if someone had pulled something heavy. The locks on the mailboxes were all a bit frayed, which didn't make sense to me. There were still these blue papers sticking out of them. If someone checked these mailboxes so frequently that the lock was getting janky, why didn't they remove the flyers? And finally, there was the basement. It's not uncommon to lock the basement of an apartment building to keep nosy tenants from messing around with things they shouldn't. But there was a drainage slit in the floor, as if ready to clean up large amounts of liquid with a spray hose. So while my life continued, it did so with a tinge of doubt. I was anxious. I still kept my schedule of working at night and attending prayer, but I wasn't feeling the same sense of calm anymore. I was anxious about going home. I didn't know what to expect. I decided that I ought to try talking to my neighbors again. For real this time. I needed answers, and if I couldn't get them, I would leave that place come hell or high water. So after Jumu'ah, I went home with the intent to go door to door. So I did, floor by floor. I could hear them, different voices doing different things, talking, eating, listening to music. But as soon as I knocked, they went quiet. No one came to open, not even Yafeyu. I wanted to go back to my place and close my eyes to the whole thing, but I couldn't. I couldn't pretend like there was nothing going on. So I checked the floors again for something drastic. I found it on the top floor of the building, a fire alarm. I pulled it. I had to get people out of those apartments, and I had to know what was going on. I was a bad neighbor, but if this continued, I wouldn't be a neighbor at all. But the alarm did nothing. It was disconnected. So while this building was in pretty good shape, it was old-fashioned. It had a sort of grimy PA system in place, with speakers lining the hallways. Looking around on the bottom floor, I found a white side door leading to a supply closet with the PA system controls. I couldn't help but notice how well used the cleaning supplies were. There was even a garden hose for spraying away liquid of some kind. I turned on the PA system and heard it crackle to life. It was old, but functional, if barely. I had to click the button a couple of times to get it to work. And as a first test, it only picked up every third syllable or so. My voice barely carried through the old wires, coming out as a distorted, crackling mess. But after a couple of seconds of adjusting and holding the cable at just the right angle, it worked. "Please exit the premise," I said. "You need to leave your apartment. This is a temporary measure." I didn't recognize my voice, and it carried so slow that I could hear myself on the floors above. This had to do the trick. If this didn't work, nothing would. I hurried up to the second floor. Every door was closed, and it was quieter than usual. Then, one by one, the doors would open. Doors clicked and swung open, tentatively. Careful eyes looked outside, scanning the premise for answers. There was Yafeyu, of course. Next to him, his wife Rashida. But there were others too. Beautiful young couples, some with children. Each and every one of them, a picture-perfect couple or family. And all of them as healthy and well cared for as you could hope for. They started walking out into the hallway. I could hear the same happening on the floor above. "What's going on?" someone asked. "Is there a problem?" "Do we need to leave?" another asked. "He said we shouldn't leave." "I don't want to leave," someone added. Please don't make me. Please." The PA system crackled again as it rose to life. Everyone looked up. "Return to homes," it growled and spattered. "Go back inside." I couldn't tell if the distortion was from the voice of the speaker or the struggling electronics, but the people weren't sticking around to get an answer. A heartbeat later, they threw themselves back into their apartments. The final face I saw was Yafeyu, apologetically closing and locking his front door. I hurried up the stairs, rushing towards my apartment. Something was moving downstairs. I could hear footsteps rushing at full speed, hot on my trail. I didn't look back. I just hurried back to my apartment, grabbed my keys, and slipped. The keys sailed across the hallway, leading somewhere in the harsh shadow of a sharp overhead light. And someone joined me in the hallway. The old man from the shop. His back was straighter, and he looked taller. I just looked at him, not knowing what to expect. Then, he spoke. It was the same raspy old voice as I'd heard down in the shop, but there was something else to it. It wasn't just a tired old voice. It was something deeper. It wasn't just a sick man. It was something inhuman, struggling to find speech in something not designed to talk. And as his eyes reflected in the dark, like a cat on the hunt, he spoke again. "You." I rushed forward, grabbing my keys. He ran towards me. Not just a brisk jog, but a full-on sprint. I could never have anticipated how fast he was. I fumbled with my keys as they stuck to my sweaty palms, and I barely got back inside before he got to me. I closed the door, but didn't get a chance to lock it. Before my fingers could reach, the door bust wide open, leaning off its hinges. The old man was tall enough for his head to reach the ceiling, but it wasn't a normal height. It was something unnatural about his proportions. As his neck extended, his head brushed against the ceiling and bent backwards at a breakneck angle. As his limbs grew elongated and boneless, his head leaned backwards, as if looking backwards. But the body never turned away from me. His arms, now longer than my entire body, pushed me across the room, breaking my kitchen table as I bruised my tailbone. "You defy sanctuary?" It spat. "You defy rest?" With a single arm, it pulled the oven out of the wall and grabbed the live wire connected to it. Without skipping a beat, it pulled on the wire, ripping it straight out of the wall. While still connected, it sparked and popped in protest as he moved closer. "You were hurting," it continued. "You were ready." It stabbed the wire past me and into my workspace, bursting my computer wide open with a violent bang. It was so hot that one of the windows cracked. "This will not fall into ruin," it growled. "It is no house of flies." With its free arm, it grabbed my shirt, pulling me up to my feet. I was choking on my own spit as I looked into a shapeless flesh-like void. As the old man's skin came apart, all that was left underneath was a strangely textured dark, like a walking night. "This will not corrupt," it growled, pulling me closer. "It is no house of lies." With the last bit of air in my lungs, I wheezed out what words I could. It's a house of rest," I whispered. "Sanctuary. Home. Home," it repeated. It poked a long finger into my chest, and I felt my breath turn cold. "Where heart is." Something ached in me, something terrible and deep, like my nerves turning upside down. It forced my eyes back into my skull, as if I was trying to look at my own spine. As I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, it was gone. Thundering footsteps disappeared down the hall, leaving me with a pounding bruise on my chest. I tore my shirt and looked for bleeding. There was a massive bruise that reminded me of a sunflower, right over my chest with a thumbprint in the middle. By morning, that bruise would have turned a sickly blue. Minutes later, I got back on my feet. I stumbled into the hall and down the stairs. I almost tripped on my own feet, but by the time I got to the bottom floor, that bruise was burning me, and with every step I took closer to the front door, it burned even more. I could feel my pulse skipping a beat and changing pace. There was a twist in my stomach as my lungs contracted, spilling out a mouthful of blood on the pristine floor. I could challenge it and press further, but I would die. So I didn't. Turning to go back upstairs, I'd see the old man staring at me from the basement door, observing me, not saying a word, just clutching a garden hose to clean up the blood from his precious floor. The next morning, the old man came to my apartment. He fixed the walls, the door, everything. He brought along some groceries and a brand new work laptop, the same kind they used at the office. I have no idea where he got it from, or how he knew where to get one. He had the oven hooked up by dinner time. I noticed how he never once reacted to hearing the adhan, the call to prayer. He didn't even look at me twice when I brought out my prayer mat. He just kept working. I didn't know what to do. I could ask someone for help, but I was afraid of what would happen if I left. There was something inside me that didn't want me to leave, and I'd never heard of anything like it before. But then again, even if I left, where would I go? What would I do? I could see why everyone stayed inside. It was easy. The old man would come up with groceries, and he would get you anything you asked for. A new computer, a phone, fresh fruit, anything you might need to keep yourself calm and controlled. So for about a week, I stayed in the house of rest. I didn't leave for the Maghrib as I used to. I didn't leave for Jamua. I didn't have any hawashi at the restaurant down the street. I stayed inside, praying for guidance. It was the most gilded cage you can imagine. It was so simple to let yourself be trapped. All you had to do was accept that this was as good as it would get. But I couldn't accept it. I just couldn't. That place may have been perfect, but I wasn't. Every day, I would roam the halls. I'd walk up and down, looking for answers. And every time those footsteps came back, I'd hurry back inside like nothing had happened. I wouldn't tempt fate, and I wouldn't attempt to leave. I would play by the rules, which made me think of Yafeyu. I managed to catch him leaving his apartment once. He looked displeased to see me as he leaned back against his front door. "You made him mad," he said. "Bad idea." "But you can leave," I said. "How can you do that?" "He lets me," he said. "It's only a small indulgence. A little wine, a pack of smokes. There's a trust. I've never had the urge to escape. So, he doesn't care." "And you're accepting this?" I scoffed. "You want this, Yafeyu?" "I have everything I need." He smiled. "I'm sheltered, I'm in love, my belly is full. This is the answer to my prayers. Isn't it yours too?" I thought about it. In many ways, yes. If I stopped working altogether, the old man would let me stay. I was sure of it. I'd still have food on my table. Hell, I'd probably have shows to stream on my laptop. And judging by the other people who lived there, he would keep me happy and healthy for as long as he could. Maybe he could even keep me young, like the others, as time passed. But there were things he couldn't heal, and there were things I didn't want to surrender. Not yet. "I can't stay," I admitted. "I will die." Yafeyu looked me up and down. There was something resolute in his expression, an understanding. Perhaps in the way we were different, could he see my pain. He walked up to me, handing me one of the fancy cigarettes from his pack. "Then remember what I said when you smoke," Yafeyu whispered. "Open the window. He doesn't check an open window." "I'm not interested in—" "No, my friend, listen," he repeated. "He doesn't check the open window." That night, I opened the window and lit my cigarette. I took in the bustling sound of the city and leaned out. It was a long drop from the 3rd floor. My heart was pounding, but not like it had been when I tried to leave on the 1st floor. Yafeyu was a genius. This thing didn't expect me to climb out of a window. Maybe it was so rigid in its rules and regulations that it couldn't fathom the window being used as an exit. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to break the rules. Using a bedsheet, I leaned out. I was having second thoughts. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't tell why. Was I dying? Or just deathly nervous? I felt around with the sole of my left foot, trying to find a grip. But no, the exterior was a smooth red. There was nothing to grab. Instead, I settled on dangling out of the window, clinging to the bedsheet for dear life. At some point, my hand slipped. I fell and smacked the corner of an arched window, sending me into a roll. I hit the ground at an angle, bruising 2 ribs and knocking my shoulder out of its socket. But I was alive. Screaming, but alive. I could hear the crackling of the PA system from the house. As a furious scream curled over the airways, I could see the lights of my apartment go on and off. I heard glass and wood break as something tore through it. People were gathering on the street, thinking there'd been a brawl, that I'd been thrown out of a window. Someone was filming, another was calling for help. As they carried me away, I saw the shadow of an old man linger in the open window, and on the floor below was Yafeyu, raising a lit cigarette at me. Other tenants joined him from their own windows, looking out at me with pity, shaking their heads, shedding a few tears. They weren't angry, they were mourning. And in a flurry of emergency services, pain, and raised voices, the house of rest disappeared from my sight. I haven't been back since. I never knew who to talk to. Everyone who I thought would listen had nothing to say. I learned quickly, after talking to my family, that my story sounds mad. I've tried to soften it, to say that the landlord was abusive, but they couldn't make sense of it. "Then why did you stay so long?" they'd ask. "And wasn't he just an old man?" You have to look at it for what it really is. You have to hear and believe the full story. That's why I wanted to talk to you here. One of the few places where I think a voice can be really heard. But I'm not going back, and I never will. The bruise on my chest has long since turned into little black strings. Most of the time it just looks like roots, but it flares up sometimes. When it does, the surrounding skin gets this mild tint of blue, like the image of a strange sunflower. I can also kind of see it in the cold. It's like it's always there, waiting just under the skin. Not too long ago, I reconnected with my lost love in Europe. I think she might have been what kept me from being complacent in the house of rest, and I'm so grateful for it. Without her, I wouldn't have seen the cage for what it was. She says she misses me too, and in a couple of weeks, I'll be going abroad to be with her again. But I wanted to share this story before I go. I wanted to talk openly about it this one last time, and then never again, because even now, I can't help but think I might have made a mistake, that I might have turned away something that could have been perfect, that if I'd only stuck to the rules and kept my head down, maybe everything would have worked out. But then I get that ache in my chest, and I can't tell what it is. It might be the threat of something vast and inhuman, claiming me as its own, or it might be a heart that I willingly give. Either way, I know that I will never return to the house of rest, not as I am, nor as I will be. I can't eat. That's the gist of it. I can't eat. I guess to people who haven't grown up the way I have, it sounds absurd. So much of our lives revolve around eating. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's a social ritual and contract. And without it, we lose a core pillar of being human. But I can't eat. I can't be a part of that. It's complicated. I grew up to a single mother with a minimum wage. How she managed to keep a sickly kid alive through all that is beyond me. And I don't mean sickly as in getting nasty colds or ear infections. I mean sick, with a big S. For as long as I can remember, I could never eat solid food. Some doctors called it inoperable achalasia, but my mom called it royal throat. Just like the kings and queens of old, she used to say. They were so used to having servants feed them that they stopped eating for themselves. It was just a nice way for her to make it sound like I was special, rather than cursed. The main problem is that I can't swallow. So instead, I'd have to puree my food and slide it down my throat with a thick plastic tube. I can't really taste anything, and the whole ordeal can look uncomfortable to onlookers. So it's something I'm very private about. I can still taste and chew things, but a pleasant taste doesn't really outweigh the threat of choking to death. I can drink, but it takes some effort. If it gets too hot or cold, my throat just shuts down. Same if it's too sugary, too spicy, or too sweet. And since I can't swallow, I just tilt my head back and let it run down my throat. Mild apple juice is an occasional treat, but I like to stick to ordinary tap water. No fizzy stuff, nothing that makes my muscles contract. Apart from that one thing, I was a normal kid. I still went trick-or-treating, and by the end of the night, I gave all my candy away to my friends. It made me bully-proof in a way. To them, I was weird. But it was the kind of weirdness that paid off. Whenever someone handed out candy or fruit or freebies, I passed mine along to those who treated me well. "You're like a truffle pig," my buddy Dawson used to say. "You get to sniff out all the good stuff, but you can't have any yourself." And that's where the nickname started, Truffle Pig. I don't know if it's some kind of myth or urban legend, but it's said that truffle pigs can never be allowed to eat the truffles they're trained to find. If they do, they're useless. They get so preoccupied with finding truffles for themselves that there's nothing else. They get a taste for it, and it's all over. I got the occasional jab and mean look about the nickname, but most of them said it with love. It wasn't mean-spirited. It went from truffle pig to truffles to ruffles to just rough or ruffy, and I guess that name's just stuck around ever since. I graduated from high school and got a job on a clam boat. Not a fancy job, but I've always loved the sea. I never get seasick or carsick or anything like that. Maybe a side effect from having a strange stomach. So when a spot opened, I was first in line. Did it for a summer as a practice run and got hired full-time a month later. Great pay, decent benefits. We usually worked on smaller vessels, inshore boats, smaller yields that could turn a surprising profit at the local seafood markets. Whatever we could get our hands on, we could sell at a huge markup. There wasn't a single Christmas where I didn't go home with a bonus. I'd end up being designated driver whenever I went out with the guys. They'd sometimes forget about my deal and bring me a beer or scotch, and they'd end up getting an extra one. I'd stare at that spicy bowl of peanuts in the middle of the table and wonder what it'd be like to pig out on them, stuff my face and go downtown, to feel the crunch in my teeth, resonating in my jaw. But that would send me straight to the hospital, or the morgue, a yellow building just down the street. Truffle pig, look, but don't taste. Mom passed away when I was 27. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was the result of a lengthy battle coming to an end. I held a speech at her wake, divided her possessions among her living relatives, packed all her things in brand new cardboard from the tool shop, picking apart a careful knick-knack ecosystem where everything has a place, leaving only pale walls and dust bunnies. It was kind of funny though. There was this one picture of her and I from when I was just an infant. Back then, I had brown eyes and hair. I thought it was someone else at first, seeing as how I now have my mother's blonde hair with green eyes. But there was a note on the back confirming that it was, in fact, our first picture together. I was offered a few days off work to get my affairs in order, but I declined. Stepping away from your routine underlines how painful the change is. By declining it, you're robbing it of its power. That's what I thought, at least. When it rains, it pours. And maybe I was distracted that one early morning in May, when I turned onto the interstate. I'd gone down that road 1,000 times, but just this once, I didn't pay attention. Maybe the other driver didn't either. Either way, the collision was violent. No one died, at least. They had to cut me out, but the other guy walked away without a scratch. They put me in a neck brace and took me to a hospital. Ran all kinds of tests. I had a fracture in my left leg, but apart from that, it just looked bad. Most of it was surface level stuff. They still did their due diligence though. X-rays, checkups, the whole shebang. I'd have to wear a cast on my leg, but apart from that, I'd be fine. I remember the final day before they sent me home. The doctor, a middle-aged Indian woman, went through my x-rays and talked to me at length about how lucky I'd been. In between instructions on how to keep my cast clean, I threw in a question. "What about my neck?" I asked. "Am I gonna have to change how I eat?" "No, that should be fine," she said. "Why do you ask?" "The achalasia," I said. "It's inoperable. Should be in my file." "Achalasia?" She looked at me for a couple of seconds, then back up at the x-rays. "You don't have achalasia." I went over it with her again and again. I told her I'd been diagnosed as an infant, that it had stuck with me all my life, that my throat was atrophied, and that I could only have pureed food pushed down my throat with a tube. Royal throat, like the kings and queens of old. "I know what you're referring to," she said, "but I don't know what to tell you. You don't have it. From what I can see, you've never had it." She pointed at the x-rays and explained how to recognize it, and there were no signs of it in any way. I was perfectly fine. I just had to practice eating. "If you've been doing this for so long, chances are you'll never quite get used to it," she admitted. "But physically, there's nothing wrong. But it's gonna take time adjusting to." I walked out of there on crutches, but I barely even paid attention to the leg. I couldn't believe it. All this time, I could have been just like all the others. Someone must have misdiagnosed me, but there was nothing in my file suggesting that there'd ever been a conversation about achalasia in my past. In those files, I was perfectly healthy. Always had been. I couldn't make sense of it. There had to be a reason I had lived the way I had. I decided I would go through my mother's things to see if there was a hint. I had boxes to go through a second time. Maybe I'd missed something. I got a ride home from the hospital by my buddy Stevie. 40-something father of 3. Salt of the earth kind of guy. The kind of person who has a pickup and doesn't mind helping you move. 'Cause that's just what you're supposed to do. He must have noticed I was a bit quieter than usual. "Don't worry about it, buddy. Don't worry about work, Ruffy," he said. "Give it a couple weeks." "Thanks, but that ain't it," I said. "It's my throat." "Whiplash?" he asked. "Got an ache or something?" I explained to him what the doctor had said, that I was fine and always had been. I told him about the x-rays, how nothing showed, and that there was nothing in my files. Stevie got so caught up in the story that he almost missed a green light, making the guy behind us lean on the horn. Stevie snapped out of it and stepped on the gas. "That's fucked up," he said, making a left turn. "But I mean, that's good news too." "I suppose. Yeah. I was gonna have to get used to a new way of living. One where I could sit by the table and share a meal. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. I was a bit scared. After all, what if I didn't like it? Could I just go back to pretending? But first, I had to give it a try. I couldn't just go trudging into a restaurant and order a ribeye. I had to try something small. I had Stevie drop me off at a supermarket. I bought some yogurt, cucumber, and chocolate ice cream. I asked him to join me in the kitchen. I figured it would be the best way to have someone call for help if things went sideways. Like the doctor had said, even if I was physically okay, it would take time getting used to the sensation. There aren't exactly tutorials on how to eat. It's supposed to come naturally to us. It's not something you learn. We sat down at my kitchen table, and I cracked open the yogurt. Stevie had a Coke. I didn't have any cutlery, so I had to grab a teaspoon from my mom's kitchen box. I dipped it in the yogurt, picked it up, and observed. My heart was beating out of my chest. "You alright?" Stevie asked. Just nervous." "Just try a little," he smiled. "Try to enjoy it." So I tried it. I let my tongue soak in the soft vanilla and acidic tang. I took a deep breath, leaned back, and just tried. I almost choked as my throat muscles cramped up, but it went well enough. It was wildly uncontrollable though. I coughed a little, but held up a hand to show Stevie I was okay. I tried a little more, and then some ice cream. It was difficult, and I could feel an ache in my throat. I was flexing muscles I'd hardly ever used. Over a painstakingly slow hour, I tried little bits and pieces of things. I was getting used to it, slowly but surely. I had to stop when I got to the cucumber though. I cut it up and tried eating it like mush, but part of the skin got stuck in the back of my throat. I ended up having a coughing fit. Stevie had to give me a couple of back slaps. We decided to pause for the day, but it was promising. I was feeling something I hadn't felt before. It was a new experience, and I was getting better at it. "Give it a month," said Stevie. "By the time that leg cast is off, you'll be a brand new person." Over the next few days, I was stuck at home, waiting for my leg to heal. Meanwhile, I took some time to go through my mom's stuff. Everything from old phone books to photo albums. There were a lot of baby pictures, but they weren't in a particular order. In most of them, I had blonde hair and green eyes, but there were a couple where it was still a clear brown. I could see a couple of things change in my mom too. Her hair getting longer, the marks under her eyes growing deeper. But there were other things too. There was this one picture where she was breastfeeding me, and another shortly after where she used a bottle. There was also one where she'd been in some sort of accident, wearing a bandage that reached up to her shoulder. All the while, I was microdosing on food. Little pieces of ice cream and yogurt, mashed potatoes and gravy, a strawberry sorbet. It took some time to get my throat moving, but after just a couple of days, I could swallow with little to no problems. The first solid food I ate was a salty peanut. I bit down and chewed it for so long that my jaw ached. And when I finally swallowed it, I could feel a tingle in my neck, like little puzzle pieces falling into place. I was so relieved I could cry. I ended up eating a whole bag, letting a rerun of Friends echo in the background. But all I could hear was the sweet crunch of peanuts breaking against my perfect enamel. It was such a filling sensation. Flavor, texture, mouthfeel. And with it all, the realization that I had so much more to experience. It was euphoric. I wanted to save the first time I had a big dinner for a special occasion with my work friends. Not just Stevie, but the whole crew. My cast was still healing, so I had some issue getting around, but that wasn't going to stop me from having a fantastic night. A proper steak dinner, a shrimp cocktail, garlic bread. I didn't hold back. I think my colleagues could feel the change in the air as they got equally excited to order. We had some drinks, made some jokes, and left all the pretense at the door. Just guys being guys. As soon as I dug into my shrimp cocktail, I could feel something. There was this rush of energy, like an electric surge. I could feel my pupils growing larger, and I couldn't close my eyes. My breathing grew shallow, and my pulse wouldn't stop rising. It's like I was on some kind of drug or fighting for my life. I thought I might be having an allergic reaction, so I had to stop myself and do a mental check. I felt fine. I was fine. Great, actually. The moment my steak arrived, the others raised a glass. "To good food," Stevie said, "and to good friends." The others echoed the sentiment, but before they got to good friends, I'd sunk my teeth into the steak. I could feel the juices soaking into my teeth. It's difficult to describe the sensation. It's like I didn't just eat a steak. I could hear the bovine death cry in the back of my head. I could feel myself growing as a predator, sinking my teeth in like a prowling tiger. I daydreamed with my open eyes, watching the red of the meat pulse with an invisible heartbeat. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear Stevie saying something, but I couldn't make out the words. I bit down, hard, and tore away. My teeth ached, as if they were pushing themselves out of my mouth, reaching for more meat. And with every passing second, the restaurant faded away, until something cold splashed across my face. I was lying on the floor. My work friends were standing in a circle around me. One of the waiters called an ambulance. My hands were covered in grease. I'd grabbed the steak right off the plate with my bare hands. There were bite marks on my forearm. Deep ones, still bleeding. I had to get my arm stitched up. According to Stevie, I'd gone completely feral. I'd torn that steak up, reached across to Luke's pork chops, and grabbed that too. When I couldn't immediately grab more meat, I'd fallen to the floor, biting my own arm like I was trying to subdue a prey animal. They'd never seen anything like that. Some kind of episode, Stevie said. We're worried about you. Doctors didn't know what to make of it. Some kind of chemical imbalance from a sudden shift in my diet, combined with stress and physical recovery. It didn't help that I'd been drinking. Not much, mind you, but enough for it to affect me. They couldn't point to a single instigating factor, but instead prescribed me a kind of anti-anxiety medication. They were just throwing darts at the wall at that point. Coming home, I noticed something peculiar. There was a crack in the side of my cast. I'd just been at the hospital, and it had been fine, so it must have happened recently. I thought about going back there, but I flexed my leg a little, and it felt fine. And in a couple of minutes, the whole cast peeled off. My leg was healed. Now, I'm no doctor, but I couldn't feel anything wrong with it. I could put pressure on it, walk, flex my foot, not even with a hint of pain. The only thing I could point out as being unusual was a strange skin growth on the left side of my thigh. At first, I thought it was a long strand of hair, but it was too thick and covered in skin. Touching it didn't hurt, so I just broke it off and held it up. I got a little spot of blood from it, but nothing major. The thing was moving when I held it up, contracting over and over, like a dying insect, or like the leg of a shrimp. I got a call from my boss the following morning. They insisted I took some time off, in accordance with my doctor. They were eager to have me back, but I had clearly not adapted to my new circumstances. It was a very diplomatic way of saying I was making people uncomfortable, and that they needed some time before they could forget that mental image of me gnawing on myself like a wild animal. But that just gave me more time to experience things on my own. I made a long list of things I was going to eat. Pork, chicken, turkey, maybe something a bit more unusual like alligator. At least 3 kinds of fish, crab, and every kind of fruit I could find at the supermarket. Then again, fruit didn't excite me as much. There was something about biting into meat that was way more satisfying. I enjoyed the taste of fruits and veggies, but there was something about the texture of meat that I couldn't make sense of. Then again, this was my first time experiencing food. There was no way for me to know this wasn't normal. When I got back from my shopping spree, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands. I noticed something in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked different. The pupils looked rectangular. I figured it was a trick of the light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. But I was too excited to care. I was gonna have a field day, so I washed my hands, splashed some water on my face, and hurried into the kitchen. At first, I was systematic, pulling out little samples of things, bite-sized nuggets of meat, ready to be plopped down in a single gulp. I prepped a couple in the frying pan, others in the oven. I'd bought a new air fryer to try out some combos. I put on some music and had a blast. Everything was so rich, so succulent. Different textures, different flavors, and a world to discover. I could imagine the salty sea running between my fingers as I bit down on the crab meat. I could feel the textures of the feathers as I slurped up a slice of turkey. I adored it. Every last second of it. I spent close to 13 hours that way. Just eating, eating, eating. The shops closed and opened, and I was the first in line to get more. I must have looked like hell. That's what the look on the cashier's face had said. I would fall asleep at the dinner table, still holding my next piece of meat. A chicken wing, a tomahawk steak. An honest-to-God cheeseburger. I'd close my eyes and keep eating, dozing off between bites. It was heaven. While I didn't know it at the time, I kept that up for 49 hours in total. I was in this meat-stained daze, not knowing what was happening around me. I'd missed calls and appointments, emails, bills to pay. I hadn't paid attention to any of it, and my systematic approach had completely fallen out of the window. It was a marathon. When my kitchen ran empty, I lumbered to the bathroom. My stomach felt like wearing a backpack on the front, like an imbalance. I had to lean my arms against the wall to keep myself from tipping over. I was scared to look in the bathroom mirror, but I did it anyway. The pupils of my eyes had gone horizontal. The skin of my left leg had turned into a kind of shell. My teeth had grown long and jagged. My nails curled into claws. And throughout my hair, I could feel these long hollow tubes, like growing feathers of a baby bird. My tongue was thick and discolored, my skin turning a reddish brown, with white milk-like spots. I just stared at myself, not grasping that this was a mirror. It showed me, but it wasn't me anymore. And when that realization hit, two thoughts struck me at once. One, that I was destroying myself, that this whole ordeal was what my mother had tried to avoid. Two, that I didn't want to stop. I needed to keep going. I went through my mother's things in between meals. It's hard to piece together a life after it's gone, but it's even harder when you think you already know what it looks like. But my mother's life was very different from what I imagined. Sure, my father was a mystery. There was no mention of him anywhere, except that they met at a punk concert back in the 90s, but she'd lived a very full life since then. She had friends, lovers, and plans of her own. But one thing that stood out in particular, how I'd lost my brown hair and eyes. From what I could tell, she'd hurt herself in some way. And after that, I changed. It was around the time where I'd gone from breastfeeding to being bottle-fed. A thought hit me, an uncomfortable one. I thought back on what I'd done with that steak, and the way I'd torn into it. Could I have done something similar to my mother? Had I always been like this? I tried to find more answers, more pictures, more anything. All the while, I ate and ate and ate. When I ran out of meat, I had the fruit. When I ran out of the fruit, I had the veggies, then the butter, the yogurt, the ice cubes in the back of the freezer. At one point, it was 3 a.m, and I was feverishly going through a photo album from my high school years. Nothing interesting, but I realized I didn't have anything left to eat. And yet, I was still chewing. Looking down, I had started pulling out the buttons from the remote control and crunched them up like they were little plastic cashews. I didn't care. I just had to eat. I gnawed on anything and everything. The leg of the kitchen table, the copper wire going to my bedside lamp. I smashed a wine glass on my cutting board and ground it up into something resembling salt, and ate that too. I didn't feel a thing. It was just more texture, wonderful filling texture. I was in a daze, and the next time I looked myself in the mirror, I couldn't comprehend it. When change happens rapidly and naturally, it's hard to notice. You don't really see it until you slow down long enough to care. If you've been running a marathon, you'd stop halfway through and weigh yourself. You wait until you're done. It was the same for me. I didn't realize the changes until I'd slowed down long enough to reflect on them. I wasn't human anymore. My hands had turned into this amalgamation of hoof and claw. My back was bent over with fish-like ridge running along my spine. My eyes had 3 different colors, and one of them were coming out of the socket. If I concentrated, I could move it in and out, like the eye stalk of a crab. A couple of my teeth had turned to glass and ceramic. I could spot copper cables running under parts of my right bicep. Anything and everything I'd consumed with gusto had integrated into me, one way or another. I couldn't call for help. My fingerprint didn't register on my phone lock. I couldn't make words in my mouth to speak. I turned into a flesh prison. You are what you eat. I'd lose track of time. One day, I'd have a tail dragging after me. Another, I'd have a wing instead of an arm. My whole body was bubbling, like a boiling cauldron, shifting with every bite, but with nothing left to eat. It was devouring itself, eating the last parts of me that were human. I'd awakened a process that couldn't be stopped, and it would turn on itself instead of letting me starve. There was no one to call for help. I could barely close the blinds to my windows. I spent most of my time in the shower, drinking water straight from a busted pipe. I'd spent hours there, drinking, watching myself mutate. I could even affect it in a way. Another finger, I'd think, and there'd be another finger. But it was getting harder to think, to comprehend, to put thoughts together in a way that made sense. Perhaps more things changed than I realized. After all, the brain is as much an organ as the heart, the throat, and the tongue. I'd lose long periods of time in a hazy blur. I remember snatching a bird off the windowsill and eating it whole, like popping a grape. I'd walk around gnawing on the curtains like they were long strands of spaghetti. But in a way, I knew I was losing myself. Whenever I had a moment of clarity, I could feel my heart sink into that empty pit in my stomach. I'm going away, I'd think. I'm losing myself. So with every fiber of my being, I grabbed a piece of paper, bit my finger, and wrote in blood, "Stay human." It's difficult to describe the mind of an animal. A part of you disappears. You don't think about inconvenience or what ifs. You think about your next meal, where to sleep, and where to get water. You don't care if you knock over a lamp or pull out a cable. It's just noise. I remember watching that paper, knowing it said something, but the symbols didn't mean anything. It turned from words to scribbles. At one point, I mistook them for droppings and started to look for mice, but didn't find any. I didn't consider myself lost. I didn't consider anything, and for days, I lumbered back and forth, turning my home into a nest. Then, at some point, the symbols made sense. A rare moment of clarity. Stay human. I knew it was temporary. A matter of minutes, maybe an hour. I had to think of a plan. Something, anything, that would make me stay human. Everything pointed to me taking on the properties of what I ate. So if I wanted to make myself human, there was only one solution. One grotesque, unthinkable solution. Now, I could find something tasteful in everything I ate. Anything from glass to copper to wood and bone. But having to eat human meat to find myself, that was a line too far. But what choice did I have? I made a plan. It was a long shot, but it was the only one I could think of. I could feel myself slipping, so I tried to remember 3 things. The color of the building I had to go to, the direction I had to move, and that there was meat there. Color, direction, meat. I repeated it like a mantra. I remember standing by the front door, pressing my head against the wood. I could hear someone taking their sweet time to lock up and leave in the hallway outside. Please just go, I prayed. You have to go. By the time they were gone, so was my mind. All that remained was color, direction, and meat. I made it outside. I followed the direction, looking for the color. A yellow building just down the street. I would run through the dense woods on all fours, thundering like a hoofed gorilla. I could feel my body changing to sustain the momentum, my arms growing heavy. I had to force myself to keep going, to stay focused on the task at hand. There were so many distractions, cars in the distance, voices, bright lights casting shadows of potential prey. But I followed the direction in my mind, and I saw the building with the color, and I knew there'd be meat. I didn't even notice the locked door. I walked straight through like I was made of paper. There was no guard there, thankfully. If I had the mind to read, I would have noticed the sign of County Morgue. I would know what the smell from the metal boxes meant, but in the mind of an animal, you don't care about the name of your prey. You don't give meaning to your actions. You just take what you want and make it your own. So that's what I did. I'm not going to go into detail. I can't. I remember every bite, but I can't bring myself to put it into words. A man who had died from a heart attack. An older woman who had broken her neck. I pulled them out and did what animals do. Meat, bone, organ. Later, the papers would say it was a bear. They weren't entirely wrong, I suppose. I lumbered home, dragging my bloated stomach through the woods. I'd feel my senses returning to me, a mind becoming human. But with that realization came understanding in what I'd done, and the searing emotional pain that ensued. I lay there among the berry bushes and blue sunflowers outside my apartment complex, hoping no one would see me as I waited for an opportunity to go home. But honestly, at that moment, I think I rather would have died. So here we are, back at the start. I can't eat. My hair has grown out into a mix of black and gray, a combination of the two people missing from the morgue. My face still looks like my own. I guess that part was still buried somewhere deep inside me. I'm a little taller, a little heavier, but my colleagues have chalked it up to a change in my diet. I've gone back to an all-puree lifestyle. That same old bottle photo straight in my gut. I can't allow myself to be lost to sensation again. I treat myself to some fruit every now and then, and the occasional drink, but I don't eat full meals. I don't want to tempt fate any more than I already have. I'm back at my job, and I think I'm doing all right. People are looking at me like they always have. No one questions that I've gone back to what works for me. They could see for themselves that something didn't quite sit right when I started eating. They didn't want to see that roughie again, and that's fine with me. Of course, I want to know more, but the only person who could tell me for sure has passed on. There are no more leads, no more signs. The only thing I could find was a curiosity among my mom's old letters. I'd missed it once because I was stuck in her collection of birthday cards. But there was a handwritten note from an anonymous sender. I told you not to breastfeed him. No name, no signature, just messy handwriting on a crumpled up piece of yellow paper. All in all, life goes on. I know I'll never really be like everyone else, but I think that's okay. I can pretend for as long as I need to. Maybe it's okay to be a tainted truffle pig, as long as you don't go looking for something to eat. But if I'm honest, sometimes I wonder if I gave in fully and let myself run loose, if I consumed anything and everything, what would that make me? If I put it all into a single package, what would I become? Truffle pig, look, but don't taste.